It's hot here. Fuck
It's
me. Why is
always.
this hot
I think
here?
you just swore.
We're not streaming. we're not
I was
recording yet.
go live.
Whatever.
That might be the very
Why
first
is it
thing
so
people
hot in
hear.
here? Let me just. Okay, well then don't listen to this part. Sorry, it's too late. Bye.
What is okay?
Quit.
Is this working?
No more podcast.
Hold on. I might have to re thingy anyway. It's probably working, but my interface doesn't make me think it's working. Hold on. Let's see what's going on. This is behind the scenes. What? What's going on? Okay. Jeez. My phone just wigged out. Okie dokie.
All right, podcast back on. Change my mind.
Live. Okay. Let's see.
Where are we at here?
Oh, all right. Well,
2 minutes.
My interface doesn't show the video working, but I can see us on YouTube. So,
yay!
And with very little lag. So, yeah, I'm going to assume that will continue. Anyway, folks, this is the behind-the-scenes version. Yeah, in case you couldn't tell already by the cussing.
Can't you cut it out or something? I don't know.
Well, no, it went live, Tom. I said I was hitting go live, and then the very first thing you said.
What's the recording part? I wasn't listening to you. I mean, when does it start recording?
Well, we've been recording our audio since before we started streaming.
I know, but we're going to cut all that out.
Well, yeah, that we cut
It's not my fault it's hot in here.
All right, well, that's what happens. We said this video wasn't for kids. At least I did on YouTube, because otherwise we'd have to be ever so careful about what we do if this video were for kids, but it isn't.
What could we possibly do that other than what I just did? Which it's not my fault.
It's the whole.
It's December.
You have to declare if your video is for kids because then it changes what ads they're allowed to put in. That's really all YouTube cares about.
I wish they would not just put it. I wish they would not put any ads in it. No, I don't need to make any money off of YouTube.
No. We could demonetize if you want.
We can't because you can't schedule things or something. I thought.
Well, no, you have to have the tier. Oh, I see. Yeah. You have to have the most basic of ads. That is
right.
That's true.
Right, and that's the only reason why we have ads on YouTube at all.
Right.
So demonetize me, YouTube. Come at me, bro. All right, let's get this thing started. Come on. What are you messing around for? God. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered, and this is our final Q&A episode for 2019.
That is true.
Yeah, we're recording this on Tuesday, the 17th. So this will go up on the Friday, and then so next week is Christmas, and we're not going to be recording an episode on Christmas Eve, because that's when it would have fallen. And we won't be recording an episode on New Year's Eve either, for obvious reasons. So that is the next 2 weeks. We won't be recording our normal Q&A episodes, but you will not go without an AV Rant episode to listen to, even on Christmas, even on New Year's Day, because we've got interviews, Tom. That's what we did.
Yep, we're going to be doing, the Friday this 27th. We'll post, for the podcast at least, we'll post the interview with Phil Jones of Sound United.
That's right.
Sound United's the parent company that owns Denon, Marantz, Polk,
Deftech,
Hios, Deftech, Boston Acoustics, and Class A.
Yep, that's them.
Or Class E.
Class A.
Class A. But we didn't talk about Class A because we don't care.
We really didn't in that interview. If you were hoping for a lot of news about Class A, you shall be disappointed. That
I am
really
sorry,
didn't come up.
I really could not care less about Class A. They are beautiful. And if someone were to give me Class A gear, I'd be happy to accept it. If it were a processor, I would be happy to resell it because I don't want not Odyssey. So
no, we covered a lot in the interview with Phil Jones. Tom and I learned a couple of things, and
yes, we did.
There was some great info in there.
We had a couple of things confirmed.
That's right.
Some things that I had been saying for years that I was pretty sure were true,
That's
and
right.
he confirmed it.
But there were a few specific questions that, like, either we were requested that we just don't ask outright, or it was sort of answered in a little bit roundabout way. So we can't promise that you'll have everything that you ever hoped for, but we had an hour. We tackled a lot, so I think you can look forward to that. And then on the week of New Year's, we're going to have another interview. This is a surprise for people. People are just hearing about this.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So we're going to be, once again, with our good friend Gary Yakubian from SVS, talk about the new 2000 Pro Series subs and anything else we can get out of them.
Yeah, this one is going to be very free-flowing. I haven't even prepared a question list as I normally do for interviews because, hey, we've talked to Gary a bunch of times. Nick might be there as well. I don't know. That isn't for certain just yet. But no, we haven't talked to Gary in quite a while, actually. They've had a bunch of products come out in between the last time that we talked to him. So plenty to chat about.
You've got questions for SVS. Send them in now.
Good luck. That's happening tomorrow as we record this. If you
got, if you didn't
only if you're watching live, that is the only possibility.
The live recording with the bad word at the beginning.
That's right. Oh. Now people will have to go look that up, Tom, if they're listening to the finalized version.
Let's hear Tom get mad about how hot it is in his room.
Yeah, that's new. No one's ever heard that on this podcast.
That's
before.
never ever been heard before in this podcast. I'm a human being.
Mm-hmm.
You say bad words every once in a while.
Living in Florida, that's your problem.
It is absolutely 100% my problem. I'm so irritated with how hot it is right now. And it's not really that hot outside. It's like 60-something degrees. But it's just because this room is very far away from everything else. So the lights in here heat everything up. And I have LEDs. It's not like I'm running halogens in here or something like that. I mean, I'm running cool lights, but it still warms up the room. So I keep the door open so that the air will flow in between, but it doesn't. It takes a little while to kick in, and the AC, whatever words.
All right. Well,
this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask us by email us at question@avrant.com, and we will answer you in 2020.
It could be. I don't know. Are you able to go along? Are we able to try and get through as many as we can this week? Let's try. Try not to leave people hanging. There's 21 questions, Tom. We're not getting through 21 questions.
There's not a chance. There's not a chance. I do have to. My son was sick yesterday, so I got to pick him up from school today because he got my parents sick and everything else.
Let's crack on. Question@avrant.com. AVRant.com is our website, of course.
And you can leave us a comment there if you want to get your question to us that way. Facebook.com/AVRant Podcast is a good way to contact us if you're not going to use email for NSA reasons. I don't know why you would be a member of Facebook. YouTube.com/AVRant. You can contact Rob directly. Rob at AVRant.com. His Twitter is at First Reflect. I'm Tom at AVRant.com. My Twitter is at AVRant_Tom, where I am not active at all.
Nope. But last week's podcast did post, so that was good.
There we go. So we're going to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you do is support the podcast in some way. You can do that financially by going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and going to a PayPal donation site. PayPal will take your PayPal information or your credit card information if you don't have a PayPal account, which is perfectly fine. They'll take some of the money for themselves and most of it and give it to us. So we want to thank Michael and Rohan for doing that in this last week. So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Rohan.
Indeed, Michael, Rohan, thank you both very much for the donations.
And if you want to do a subscription-like service where you sign up and every month we get a little bit of your money, you can go to patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. And Patreon will take as little as $1 or as much as infinity dollars per month and give us some percentage of it. So we want to thank our 96 patrons, including Richard, Jim, and Turned Toast.
That's the only name I had on the email. He didn't sign his email, so I'm not sure what his real name is.
All right. Richard, Jim, and Turn Toast are some patrons that have mentioned that they would like to be mentioned, so we are mentioning them. Right. And once we get to 100 patrons on patreon.com, our listener Andrew will have us draw one name out of a hat.
Yep.
And that name will get a handmade sci-fi themed model of their choice. He has a selection. Not all of them are constructed as of yet, so if you choose one that is not already constructed, he will construct it for you, paint it, and put the stickers on or whatever it is that he does, and then mail it to you. So we want to thank Andrew for that and thank our patrons over at patreon.com for more.
That's right. Once we get to 100, that draw will be on. Thanks very much to Andrew for setting that up and offering to do that. Thanks, Richard, Jim, and Turn Toast, whoever you are, for being some of our patrons and our, 93 other patrons at the moment, because we have 96 total. That's awesome. Let's get us to 100. We can do it.
We want to, if you can't support us financially, you figure out some way to support us, then let us know what you did and we will mention you. So once again, we're going to mention James House of Cards. He bought a whole bunch of speakers from Parts Express. And when I say a whole bunch, holy crap, that is
That's
a
a lot of
stack of
boxes.
speakers.
That's a lot of boxes.
And then he emailed Parts Express to say it was all because of us. So, I mean, I don't know what he exactly said, but I'm going to say that's what he said. But why does he have so many speakers?
I don't know, man. Dude likes to buy home theater gear. Can't blame him. He's come to the right place to talk about that stuff.
Let's talk. We also want to thank Tom for sending Rob an Amazon gift card. It wasn't me. I didn't send it to him, but it's different Tom. So thank you, Tom.
Yes, Tom. Thank you very much. That was appreciated.
All right, in the news this week, Canadian's largest theater chain, Cineplex, is being sold to London's Cineworld for $2.8 billion.
That's right.
Guys go to the movies a lot over there, apparently. So there you go.
Yep, that's it. So Cineplex, many years ago, bought up Famous Players. We used to have two large theater chains. Cineplex was the smaller of the two, but they bought the bigger one and became the only game in town for pretty much all Canadian theaters. And now they're being sold to London's Cineworld. So I'm assuming it'll just continue as Cineplex by Cineworld or some such thing. But there you go. Right. That's that.
I guess that's news. Tidal has added a bunch of Dolby Atmos music tracks to its hi-fi tier, but it only works with certain Android phone and tablet models at the moment. So wait for your app to update before trying it. I guess.
So you'd have to have an Android phone that, of course, works with Atmos audio to begin with, and that's a small selection at the moment. Right. But what's interesting here is previously we had Amazon Music HD, and that only worked with the Amazon Echo Studio speaker, which has one tweeter and one upward firing driver, and you could pair two of them together to make a 2.0.2 Atmos system. But that was the only way to hear streaming Dolby Atmos music until now. Now Tidal is adding it to their service, so Amazon Music HD is not the only game in town anymore. Now Tidal has it, and Tidal is bringing it to other devices. So as this continues to expand, I imagine this will come to iOS because there are iPhones and iPads that support Dolby Atmos, and then I'm like, bring it to Android TV, because then the NVIDIA Shield will all of a sudden be able to, I mean, it can output Atmos. We know it can do that. So, that'll suddenly become like, hey, you want the highest end streaming music service? It could be through your NVIDIA Shield. Sony just added Atmos support to their Android TV based actual smart TVs. So, it's looking promising that we'll be able to listen to some streaming Dolby Atmos music on something other than just the studio speaker.
2.2.2?
2.0.2.
Okay, 2.0.2. It's dumb. Whatever. Okay, I'm sure
that's why I'm excited for this. It'll bring it to something a bit better than just that.
Yep. Microsoft unveiled the physical appearance and the name of their next Xbox console, the Xbox Series X, because there wasn't enough X's in the name.
There were not.
They're like, to make this name better, one more X.
Uh-huh. I mean, we had the Xbox One X, so now it's Xbox Series X. I'm assuming there will be other models in this series as time goes on, because it just looks like a PC tower.
Well, so I think they're just trying to get away from anywhere to the internet community to shorten their name to Xbone again. That's what it
now
says
it's
on
just
my
Xbox
remote.
Sex, because
that's right.
Series X quite easily gets shortened down to SE capital
the XS.
X.
Yeah. The X Sex. That's it.
Yep. It's what they want. That is what they've always wanted. By naming it Xbox, they always wanted people to associate it with sex, because that'll sell, won't it?
It's got 3 X's in it.
That's right, sure does.
It's already the triple X.
Right.
So. Anyways, it'll be available 2020. It's about a year from now, so roughly 6 inches by 6 inches by 12 inches, which sounds remarkably like a tower.
It's a box. Computer. When they say it's an Xbox, that's a box, all right.
You can lay it down horizontally, so it'll fit in a typical TV stand. There's a slot opening for its Ultra HD Blu-ray disc drive, a large cooling fan on the top, or its right side if it's horizontal. And the new controller is ever so slightly tweaked for better ergonomics. And it adds a dedicated share button that borrows the better D-pad from their current Elite controllers. Microsoft confirmed that all Xbox One accessories and controllers will work with the Series X, and the Series X controllers will work with Xbox One consoles. And Honestly,
and it's backwards
are we excited
compatible
about this?
with all the games. So everything that an Xbox One could play, including the backwards compatible 360 and original Xbox games, the Series X will also play all of those. So just bring your whole library forward.
Yeah. They didn't say anything about VR. I kind of figured VR would be.
They didn't mention it at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they'll probably have an XX VR.
Why not?
That will come out after this.
Possibly.
Or maybe a higher tier level. They're not even trying anymore. They're just like, just make a computer.
Yeah. Let's make a very simple box.
Somebody call Alienware and get us a gaming laptop, a gaming computer, and a cool box. They do that good,
when you want to replace parts inside and upgrade it like you would a PC, that's a pretty simple case to remove, I would think.
Yeah. When the red ring of death gets you,
that's right.
They won't have to pay much for labor getting the 4 screws at the top of the thing. Maybe they'll be awesome. Who knows? Maybe I'll have one. I doubt it. I already don't like the fact that if you lay on that side, you can't put anything on top of it.
Yep.
I already don't like that. They'll start with right there because I stack stuff in here. That's why I don't like the PlayStation 3 either, because of the rounded top. All right, some comments here. Ryan wanted to say thanks for our advice to him last week regarding downsized home theater plans. His wife really likes the looks of the Q series speakers, which were an option since they come in white, but she also likes the walnut finish option. She just doesn't want black.
Yep.
So she's racist.
Oh, man. Yep. Goodbye, 2019. That's how we're leaving this off. Well done, Tom.
I make myself laugh.
You sure do.
Anyways, so we're grateful that we pointed out the capabilities of the X3600H versus the 2600H. Accessories for less of the 26 series listed at 9-channel receiver, so that was an error on their site. Lastly, Rob wondered if Ryan could orient his theater so that it's open at the back instead of on the right-hand side. But one side is a fireplace, and the other side is a door out to the garage, so that's the reason for the layout. But if like wood grain finishes are an option, that actually opens up a lot more speakers to
it does.
This.
Quite possibly.
I mean, like RBH is, do they still do with their impression series? Do they even call them impressions anymore?
We're waiting for a new impression series to replace the one they just discontinued. So that's not really.
But they always had that red
burl. No, they got rid of that with the just outgoing impression series. It was just black or gloss black last time. We'll see what they do going forward, but it'll probably all be black again because, I mean, when you look at sales figures, black speakers sell like exponentially more than any other finish option. So.
But the thing is, it's like all of us reviewers and stuff, we're so sick of gloss black and black speakers that we'll take anything that's not black. Just like that's why all the pictures and stuff you see with their reviews,
it'll be any other finish option if it exists.
Very rarely black. I mean, if it's a reviewer who's been around for a while, if it's a brand new reviewer, they're like, "Yeah, give me the gloss black." No, yeah. The only time I took gloss black on purpose was early Axiom, like what's that tower M60s. When they first started coming out with the
because that was like an upgrade finish option for Axiom, because Axiom had a whole bunch of vinyl finishes in other colors.
Right, and the gloss black was the big deal. Right. Everybody was excited about it, so that's why I got it. But that was the only one I've ever done on purpose. That's gloss black. Everything I'm like, what do you got in a wood grain?
Yeah,
anything, I'll take it. All right, let's get to some questions here. Carl. So without comment, Carl forwarded us an article from Audiophile Review asking, do cables with EQ built-in make sense in a world with digital room correction? Was it just a one page that just had the word no on it?
This was Audiophile Review, so it was what they do over at Audiophile Review.
So here's a quote from the article. It says, I sold my fair share of $3,000 speaker cable. Today I am fonder of cables that don't sound like cables.
It's Audiophile Review for you.
I really don't care about this.
Okay.
Stupid. Yeah.
I mean, same thing that we always say. Yeah, your cable should just convey the signal with, all cables will, guaranteed, attenuate the signal going through them ever so slightly. There's no such thing as a superconductive speaker wire that has zero loss whatsoever. But what we're hoping for is something that just conveys the signal from point A to point B without changing it. And the way a speaker wire would change the signal is by attenuating it in some way. So do you want a cable that has EQ In other words, it rolls off some frequencies, most likely the high frequencies, because that's what it would do. Do we want that built in on purpose to, I don't know, counteract something? Of course not. No, we don't. If you want to change the sound of your system, yes, EQ makes much more sense. You have a lot of control with manual EQ, and with something like the Odyssey Editor app, or if DRAC is built into your receiver, you have a ton of manual control. You can make the tone of your sound like almost anything you want if you want to manipulate it. So, done.
Yeah. So, okay, one of the joys of being an audiophile, and I guess I consider myself an audiophile,
yes, in the
but
true
not
sense
in this
of the word of a person who loves audio.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the joys of being not that audiophile, but the audiophile that likes to spend a bunch of money on stuff that doesn't make any difference, is talking about and buying super expensive stuff and essentially humble bragging about it online. Whether or not you actually have it, I think is questionable, but people mixing together different things in order to make essentially poorly designed speakers sound different or better, or gear that doesn't sound all that great or whatever. They really just want to spend a lot of money and look cool to their friends, and
there's
honestly,
a ton of perpetuating misinformation, and I don't even think because they genuinely believe it. I think because they know they will get yelled at by the rest of the quote-unquote audiophile community if they don't say it. Like all the reviewers who say, well, of course, this receiver from, let's say, Yamaha sounds inherently different than this receiver from, let's say, Denon. Because, I mean, it has to. We just know that it must. It's like,
well, yeah, Yamahas are more analytical and Denons are warmer.
Or vice versa, because I've certainly seen it both ways.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so what they state it as a given fact,
that's right,
and then they go on with their little
because
lives.
If they don't, there'll be the people who say, "Well, we can't listen to this reviewer. We know this is just table stakes. That this is the way things are. So if they don't mention it, how can we possibly believe what they say?"
It's the same thing when I reviewed an SACD, and I've talked about this many times on the podcast. SACD, and I said it sounds exactly the same as the CD version. They're like, "Well, if you can't hear the difference, then you're not an audiophile." I'm like, or there's not a difference.
Or you're honest. Yes, could be that. Yeah.
Or it could be that they just took the CD version and they remastered, not even remastered, just transferred it over to the SACD version and said, "Hey, you want SACD? Knock yourself out."
But anyway, if you're reading Audiophile Review purely for giggles because you're like, look at the crazy stuff that people actually print in an ongoing publication online, okay, but please don't take this. And like, is there anything factual and true ever printed in Audiophile Review? Yeah, it's bound to happen at some point. But but don't take like anything. That's
the fact that he even admitted that there are cables that don't sound, that don't attenuate the sound or don't EQ the sound. That's kind of revelatory for that.
There you go.
Magazine. To them, all cables make a difference, except for the cheap stuff, which apparently is just bad because it's cheap.
Gotta be.
All right. Anyway, same guy. What do we? Kurt? Is that who we're with? I don't remember. Carl. Some Apple TV Plus subscribers using Apple TV 4K hardware have been reporting that some shows have lost Dolby Vision. It's not every show, and the affected ones still play in HDR10. Apple has made no public comment. Any idea what's going on? Nope.
Not sure. However, when Disney, not Apple, but this pertains to it, when Disney was asked why they're using Dolby Vision on their streaming service, but seem very reticent to put it on physical discs unless the director demands it on the Ultra HD Blu-ray release, they were saying how they prefer the ability to basically change the mastering on a whim. They're like, if we want to do some change in the mastering, we can do that on our streaming service very easily. If it's on the disc, it's locked there, and there's nothing we can ever do about it in the future. And this includes, it could be literally changing one scene or one frame. They've decided to remaster it again. And so I think that's what's going on here. Apple TV Plus is a very new service. I'm sure they are still messing about with their encoding in particular, because they're looking for better efficiency in that. And it was noted that when Apple TV Plus first came out, it was using 4 times the amount of data as most other streaming services like Netflix and Disney Plus. I'm sure that they are looking at that and saying, can we make that more efficient? Does it mean we have to re-encode it? Stuff like that. These shows will come back. I'm sure they'll come back in Dolby Vision. I bet behind the scenes they're doing some remastering or re-encoding. That's a guess,
Okay.
but I think it's
That
an
makes
educated
sense.
guess. Yeah,
Well, it's a brand new service,
that's
so
right.
you gotta expect stuff like this is gonna happen no matter what. So, have you watched The Mandalorian yet? You
Oh,
don't
yes.
have it yet. You do have it.
Yeah, but
What
I've only
episode
watched
are you up to?
through episode 4. That's as far as I've gotten.
Okay, I've gotten through 3. I have
Oh,
not
okay.
watched 4 yet. My sons are all on different, like one's on 2, one's on 5.
Okay.
So I'm
That has nothing to
trying to
do
get
with Apple
everybody caught
TV
up.
Plus. That's Disney
I know.
Plus.
I know. Apple TV Plus doesn't sound very exciting.
Hmm.
Chris. Back in 2017, Chris helped install a complete home theater for a friend. Bug.
Of course. Florida.
Bug in here. There's a bug.
Hot and bug. We've checked the boxes. You've got your bingo
I
cards,
really
people.
I would very much like to move. Thank you very
AV
much.
Rant bingo is Tom mentions being hot, needing to adjust his Ecobee, and finding a bug in the theater.
I can't adjust the Ecobee from the computer anymore. I don't know why it won't log in. So I got to get up and go do it until because I don't ever think about it until I'm doing this podcast. I'm certainly not going to sit here and try to figure out the password while I'm doing this podcast. Anyways, Chris helped install a home theater for a friend. This friend has already had Philip Hue lights in other parts of her house. So Chris installed 8 more Hue lights in the theater. And since she was going to use a Harmony hub to control the home theater, Chris figured the Hue lights would integrate nicely. But the Hue lights often fail to respond, and it isn't just when using the Harmony. Even when using the Philip Hue app on her phone, sometimes the lights in the theater do not respond to commands. It isn't always the same lights, so it's all intermittent, difficult to troubleshoot, and a pain to use. Get rid of the lights. Problem solved. The house is 2 stories, and the theater is in the basement. She tried moving the Philips Hue bridge downstairs instead of upstairs. She also upgraded her Wi-Fi router to a mesh system. Nice. I want a mesh system. And she tried putting a mesh node, the Philips Hue bridge, and the Harmony hub right next to each other. But the lights in the theater were still finicky. Best Buy Geek Squad said they charge $100 just to come out and look. We charge $100 to talk about this too. PayPal us.
That's right.
I'll tell you what.
We have no way enforcing
Christmas special, $50.
Nice.
Stop listening to the podcast until you email us $50. Venmo me.
We don't have enough listenership to lose, Tom. We better not say that.
That's true. Well, I mean, she's going to, and they said up front they have no idea what the problem really is. So we'll come up for $100 and go, which is pretty much what Best Buy says every time. Thanks. Oh, well, I sent my parents went to Best Buy with a problem with their, it wasn't even a problem. I told them what the answer was, and they went to Best Buy, and Best Buy said, they're like, oh, Best Buy said something different. I'm like, that's because they're stupid, and you should have listened to me. It would have been fine. But whatever. So anyways, he told her not to go to Best Buy since they weren't going to do anything. He's seen that it's possible to have more than one Philips Hue bridge connected to a single Wi-Fi network, but you can only control one bridge at a time from the app, so you always have to manually select and go back and forth. Can we offer any advice? No, I can't.
All right.
I mean, every time whenever stuff like this happens, so first of all, explain to everybody, including me, since I'm not exactly sure, how does the Philips Hue control
Yes, and
work?
this is part of it. So you've got the Philips Hue lights themselves. Of course, those screw into your fixture or screw into your lamp. And the power has to always be on, of course, because they're sitting there. It's as though your light switch is always on. But those communicate with a Philips Hue bridge, which is its own separate little device. I mean, it looks like a little hub. It looks like a Harmony hub, basically, except it's white. But that's its own signal. It's the bridge that communicates with the lights. Now, so
is the bridge connect over like 2.4 gigahertz, or is it?
I'm not sure what over the power line. I'm not sure what frequency they're using between the bridge and the lights.
It's wireless.
But it's the wireless signal goes between the lights themselves and the bridge, and then the bridge connects to your regular Wi-Fi router. So when you're sending a command from, say, the app on your smartphone, it goes Wi-Fi from your phone to your Wi-Fi router. Your Wi-Fi router communicates with the Philips Hue bridge, and the Philips Hue bridge communicates with the lights themselves. It isn't a direct connection from the lights to your router. There's no direct connection there.
So the problem has to be between the bridge and the lights.
It's the bridge, and I'm betting these are recessed can lights. You know, it's a basement theater that was set up. I'm betting they're recessed can lights. I'm betting they're metal cans that are around those lights, and they are obstructing the wireless signal. I bet if you could take a Philips Hue bridge and put it in the theater, like on the floor in the middle of the floor so that it literally has a line of sight.
It would be worth testing it just to take take it and put it in the main seat.
That's what I want him to do is to
Yeah.
test that, because the Philips Hue bridge itself is the part, and then its communication to your Wi-Fi router, I mean, that's actually done with an Ethernet cable. So if she's already set up a mesh system, maybe she puts a mesh node with an Ethernet connection. In the theater, you put a Philips Hue bridge in the theater, so it literally has a line of sight to the lights themselves. I mean,
Right.
you could do it as a test, and if it works, then you know that the problem is between the lights and the bridge, and I'm almost certain that it is. So similar with the Harmony.
It's gotta be.
With the Harmony hubs, you've got the Harmony remote in your hand is communicating via RF to the Harmony
Right.
hub. The Harmony hub can then connect to your Wi-Fi network. Your Wi-Fi network plugs into the Hue bridge, right? So again, I don't think
it's very unusual for your Harmony hub to mess up, in my experience.
Yeah, and I don't think
You know.
it's anything to do with the Wi-Fi. So
No,
I don't
think
think
so either.
even upgrading to the mesh Wi-Fi was probably necessary in this case. Although if it gives you the ability to plug a Hue bridge into your Wi-Fi system inside your theater, then that would be nice. But I'm pretty sure it's the lights themselves to the Hue bridge. That's the wireless signal that's being interrupted. Now, Richard Gunther over at Home On. First of all, I will have his contact info from his website over at the Digital Media Zone. I'll post the contact info for him on avrant.com because he is the man to talk to about this stuff. But he pointed out on his other show, the Smart Home Show, how the newest Philips Hue lights actually have considerably better wireless radios in them than ones from even just a year or two ago. But Chris was saying this was pretty recent that he did this. Like back in 2017, they did the theater, but he didn't add the Hue lights in the theater until recently. So I don't
Right.
think he's using old model Philips Hue lights in the theater, but maybe they are. Maybe they're 2 or 3 years old or something like that. And the new ones, supposedly, according to Richard Gunther, do have considerably better radios. The newest ones that like just came out this year. So yeah, multiple things there, but I'm pretty sure it's the lights themselves to the Hue bridge, and if you brought a Hue bridge into the theater for actual line of sight, it should work.
Yes. I mean, I guess it depends on how much interference there is, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear
No,
that.
it's just I don't think it has anything to do with the Wi-Fi network.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, unless, no, I really don't see any reason why it would be. All right, Dennis. Dennis is renovating a room in his basement. It's stripped down to the studs right now. When it's finished, it will be 12 by 20 by 7. It's short, so basement, yes. He would like to nail down his theater layout so that he can plan his in-wall wiring and conduit runs. He's planning for a 5.2.4 configuration. Does it make more sense to make the room wider than it is long and use a large TV with wider seating, or should he make the room longer than it is wide and go for a false wall with an acoustically transparent projection screen? It's 20, and he's only planning for one couch no matter which way he goes.
Well, his second question is there room for 2 rows of seats? So
Well, in a 20-foot room, it's so you can always you can put them on the back wall for sure, no matter what. But because I think my is 21 feet, and I have plenty of room for a second row of seats.
I'm voting for the long way. If
I almost always do.
Yeah, if you go the wide way, you definitely don't have room for 2 rows of seats. But that's why in his diagram it's just the generic image. But he was going to have wide seating if he goes the wide way. But I'm like, have wide seating and then a much smaller screen, and that doesn't make it. When you can go the lengthwise, I would go the lengthwise. That's what I would do.
But if you're gonna, the way that you've got your, it's just sort of a generic setup here.
Sure.
So he's got it false wall up front with the couch just beyond halfway. The back couch would be, if you set it up this way, on the very back wall. Yeah. There'd be very little.
And the back couch, so since in his room, for people who can't see the diagram, the entrance is on the right-hand side on what would be the back wall if you're setting things up the lengthwise. And it's actually, the entrance is actually like back a little bit. So from the main part of the back wall to the physical front wall is 19 and a half feet. And then there's like an extra 2 feet for where the doorway is in the rear right-hand corner. So you could even have your second row of seats like shifted over to the left, That's not the end of the world. You know, that gives you an easy walk way to get in. Yes, the person who's sitting in the literal rear left corner, maybe they don't have the best experience, but you put the person who really doesn't care about the audio as much as everybody else in that one seat, and the vast majority of the time, you and your wife are probably the only two people in here, and you'll be sitting in the main seat in the front, and everything will be great. So, 19 feet. We actually talked about this last week or the week ago.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, and he's looking for a 10-foot viewing distance. It's like, it's just enough. It's just enough. It's cozy. It's, you know, you're not going to have a ton of room, but it's just enough to do the 2 rows of seats. And shifting it over to the left makes it really easy in your case.
And this last question, of course, is about screen size. And because you're running a false wall up front, you can really go just about as big as you want to go. And that's the question you need to answer for yourself, which is, how big of a field of view do I want? And you do that by going to a movie theater, sitting in the perfect spot, counting the number of tiles forward, counting the number of tiles across the front of the room if they have a tiled ceiling. If not, then walking it. You know, don't be that guy, but figure out how to do it when it's not.
Yeah, you're figuring out the ratio of from you to the screen versus how wide the screen is. But in general, like, he's looking at about a 10-foot viewing distance. Again, very similar to that advice we gave 1 or 2 weeks ago, where if you go for about 110 inches, I think you'll be right, like, smack dab where I would personally love to be at that seating distance. 110 inches is really nice. And I think that would work out swimmingly.
Carl has a Denon AVR 3312 with a 5.2 speaker setup for the late night viewing. He'd like to use his wireless Logitech gaming headset. The headset uses a USB dongle to send the wireless signal, but there is the option to plug a 3.5 millimeter cable into the USB dongle, so in the analog audio signal can be sent wirelessly to the headset. It comes with a 3.5 millimeter to RCA red and white plug adapter cable. He's tried plugging the RCA cables into one of the out connections on the back of his inlet, but it didn't work. So we can help him get this setup working. Red and white, you just plug up to what does he have? 3312 should have analog outs, right? Just plug it into the analog outs.
Although if he's got a 5.2 setup, that would only be his front left and right. So
that's true.
So I'm saying I'm going to ask you to spend a tiny bit of money and get a 1/4 inch headphone jack to 3.5 millimeter cable and just plug it into the headphone output when you want to use this.
Yeah,
because that'll definitely work. That'll
down mix it every time.
Yeah, that'll down mix everything every time, guaranteed, and it'll mute your 5.2 speakers, which he wants this for late night viewing. So I'm assuming that what he's trying to do is listen to the headphones instead of his surround sound setup. I'm like, you just plug the cable into that 1/4 inch headphone jack on the front of your Denon. That's what I would do. Now
it's like $1.
Well, yeah, mono price, right? You're getting a stereo 1/4 inch headphone to stereo 3.5 millimeter headphone cable, or even just one of those little adapters, right? That turns either one, right? Either it's a 1/4 inch on both ends and you plug it in so that it turns the big 1/4 inch jack into the little 3.5 millimeter jack, or vice versa. They're both 3.5 and you plug the adapter on to turn it into the big one. But that's the way I wouldn't mess around with Zone 2. I wouldn't mess around with pre-outs. I'd just plug it into the headphone jack. Can't get easier than that.
So Michael on Twitter asks, if you're setting up to do a subwoofer crawl, does the distance setting in the receiver matter? No.
Nope.
No.
It is one sub playing all by itself, nothing else playing with it. So signal is sent, right? Mm-hmm. And whether the driver responds instantaneously or a few milliseconds from now, it's the only thing making any noise in here. So that timing doesn't matter. It would only be if there's a second sound source, so that the relative timing between the two sound sources is somehow interacting, but you have one sound source. It doesn't matter when it starts in response to the signal.
We've talked about this a lot before, but it bears repeating. Mm-hmm. You know, the distance setting is not about the physical distance between your speakers or subs and your seat. I mean, for the speakers, it is more that way, but the subwoofers, it's not. And what it really is a delay.
It's a delay.
You're setting a delay so that all the sound is reaching the same location at the same time. Right. Now, for your speakers, which are direct firing and coming directly at you, the distance translates to the actual physical distance. But many times, especially if you have a lot of room treatments in your room and you set a subwoofer in there, suddenly the distance is going to be something totally weird compared to what you expected or what is actually the physical distance between your sub and your seat. That is because the subwoofer is bouncing all around and everything else, and it's getting absorbed by all those room treatments you put in there, hopefully.
Yeah, the very long sound
traps.
waves that are longer than any dimension of your room. You're never hearing the direct sound, you're hearing a reflected sound. So the delay in getting that time aligned could be very different than the tape measure distance from you to the sub. But when the sub is the only thing playing, then the timing doesn't matter.
Yeah, you can put the distance to whatever you want.
Sure
Yeah, I mean, you could change it to whatever. All it's going to do is delay it by a couple of milliseconds, and you're not going to care because you're not hearing it directly anyways. So he's heard us say to turn Odyssey off prior to doing a subwoofer crawl. Why? Well, because what you're trying to do is get the raw output of the sub and how it is. Odyssey is EQing the different frequency levels based on where it was when the Odyssey was run.
Yeah, and Odyssey does use time-dependent filters as well. It's not IIR, infinite impulse response filters, where it is constantly attenuating or boosting the signal ongoing. It actually can gate the amount of time when the filter is being applied to try and counteract some of this room reflection stuff that's happening. So if you were to put the sub in its original location, measure it with Odyssey, and then move the sub to your seat and still leave Odyssey active, well, it has all these filters applied, but now you've changed the location of the sub, so those filters aren't necessarily... in fact, it's almost impossible for those filters to be correct anymore. So we want to hear, what is the sub doing by itself? What is the native response of the sub with your room? You're now moving around the room to find the location with no gigantic nulls, the fewest big dips that you can, and hopefully the most even response throughout that whole frequency sweep. Now you switch positions, you put the sub in that location you found, you go back and sit in your seat, and now you go ahead and run Odyssey to correct for what's left, for what placement couldn't fix by itself.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what the whole subwoofer crawl is about, is about finding the best placement for the raw output of your sub so that when Odyssey goes in, it's having to do as little work as possible. And the reason why, and you're like, well, why did I buy this expensive receiver with Odyssey if I'm going to have it do as little work as possible? Because if you put it in a bad location, then seat to seat or location to location, the differences will be so massive that Odyssey will say, well, it's got a peak here and a null in this other spot, therefore I can't touch that frequency.
Right.
I can't.
If I try to boost to fill in the null, it'll make the seat that's already loud crazy loud. If I try to cut the seat that's already loud, it'll make the one with the dip even worse. So split the difference.
I won't touch that. Yeah. So that's why we want Odyssey to do "quote unquote" as little work as possible, meaning that it doesn't see these massive differences, so that it can say, okay, well, all across all these seats, there's a hump here. It's worse in some seats than others, but there's a hump here. Yeah. So therefore, I can cut this down a certain amount, and on average, that will make this a flatter.
That's right.
A better response.
Yeah. The other thing is you can sidestep all of that by not actually playing the sweep through your AV receiver at all. You can put the sweep on your phone and plug your phone directly into the subwoofer with a 3.5 millimeter to RCA cable. And that sidesteps all of it.
Aaron asks, have we heard the new Amazon Echo Studio that is compatible with Atmos Music from Amazon Music HD? What would we think of using a pair of them with a Fire TV to get a pseudo Atmos effect as opposed to, say, a soundbar? Now, the Echo Studios, those are like 360 speakers. They're not like bookshelves, right?
I mean, so they kind of look like, the cylindrical,
round,
like like the Sonos One or the Apple Home Pod. They have that sort of form factor, but they have only one tweeter that does fire forward. So they aren't like, spraying the sound evenly in every direction like some of those other cylinder speakers. They do have a tweeter and they do have a front. So I haven't heard it. I don't know how good it is. I've read some reviews of it, and almost everyone says, bar the upward firing driver that the other ones don't have, it sounds really similar to a Sonos One. And I'm like, that's not surprising. That makes perfect. Yeah. They probably go to the same OEM for the drivers, to be honest. So, which are... They're fine. Are they the greatest speakers ever? Certainly not. Are they the worst speakers ever? Certainly not. They're totally fine.
Can you match these with a Fire TV and get? Obviously you can play the Amazon Music HD stuff
Yes.
out of it, but will it help you with anything else? Will it give you any Atmos from anything else?
This would be the way
so.
to get. So the Fire TV could be feeding Atmos from, say, Netflix or Amazon Prime Video, and then it can connect to these, Echo Studio speakers. But any of your other sources can't. Like your Blu-ray player, your cable box, whatever, your game system, none of those can connect to the Echo Studio speakers and use them like you could a soundbar. A soundbar, you could connect anything to it, including, you plug everything into your TV and ARC feeds it all back to your soundbar. I would, if what you want is a very convenient and easy single goes up front solution that gives you something of an Atmos effect, I would still point you to something like maybe one of Sony's Atmos compatible soundbars, which, they're using the same type of psychoacoustic effect to give you the Atmos thing. There aren't actually speakers behind you. There aren't actually speakers above you. But it's one bar that sits below your TV. But now all your sources can make use of it instead of only the Fire TV. So going by the reviews of it, certainly none of them are saying that the sound quality itself from the Echo Studio is so good that it would be, worth it. Like it'd be way better than a Sony soundbar. So I would still go soundbar.
Okay. Richard, he's in the UK here. So Richard uses an Epson TW9300 projector, which is the same as the 54UB here in America. He's also got an Xbox One S that he uses for games and streaming video services. Since his Epson model is limited to 24 or 30 frames per second, if the signal is 4K HDR, cannot accept a 4K 60 HDR signal, Richard has resigned himself to never using HDR from his Xbox, since it always outputs 60 hertz and doesn't seem to way to force it to output a lower frame rate. But then you heard us talk about the HD Fury products and decided to look into them. He found a deal on HD Fury Linker, so he bought it, but now he's a bit confused by its endless number of options. Oh, this is such a Rob question. He wasn't keen on installing its drivers and digging through its software on his computer, but should he go through that hassle to make sure it has its latest firmware? The newest firmware on their download page says it's from 2017.
So not so much just for the firmware, although I certainly would want to check it. But for what he wants to do, put the software on your computer and plug in the linker via USB to your computer. You really need to, honestly, for what you want to do. And I'm not sure why he was so reticent to do so. I mean, it's a tiny little program that goes on your computer. It's not like a resource hog or anything. So
some people just don't like to download third-party apps.
Yeah, I get that, but it's worth it in this case. You want to have the HD Fury software on your computer to dig into this thing because you need to a bit.
So the best tip he found on AVS forum was to use one of the default EDID presets, but options 2 and 3 seem very similar. Both say they're for 4K 30 deep color PJ, I guess is that projector PJ, at 300 megahertz. That seems to describe his Epson model.
It does.
Option 2 says 4DK 30 hertz to all 4K 30 all. 4K 60 600 megahertz to 4K 60 420 300 megahertz. What? Then option 3 says 4K 30 8 10 12 8/10/12. I guess that's probably bit rate to 4K 30 422. So it's not 422. So 422. That tells you the color.
Yeah, the chroma.
12, that's going to be 12-bit, 300 megahertz, 4K 60 to 4K 60 420, 300 megahertz. Is there a reason to pick one of those presets over the other? Can you accept 12-bit? Is that
so
projector accept 12-bit? Because that would be the question I would ask.
Yeah, so technically it can. But so it is bandwidth limited, first of all, to the 10.2 gigabits per second. That's the 300 megahertz figure. So both of these, so the reason some places are saying not to use option 2 as it's described is because if it's somehow a 4K 30 signal that was using 600 megahertz or 18 gigabits per second, then that wouldn't work. Option 2 would leave that alone, and that would be too much bandwidth for your Epson. But honestly, neither of these is exactly what you need, because what you need is something that takes 4K 60 and turns it into 4K 30. And neither of these preset options does that. So these are lowering the bandwidth requirement by, say, turning your 10 or 12-bit signal into 8-bit, or using more chroma subsampling, turning a 444 or a 422 signal into a 420 signal. There are ways to decrease the bandwidth, and it's doing that, but it isn't changing the frame rate, and that's actually what you need. Because if your projector gets a 4K 60 signal, even if it's a low bit rate 4K 60 signal, it sees the 60 part of that and goes, well, I can't do HDR. And what he wants is the HDR. So you need to put in the software and do a conversion that's going 4K 60 to 4K 30 at all times so that you can have 4K 30 with HDR. That's the thing that you actually want.
So another tip that was offered was that if he does install the software, which he's going to, he'll get the option to set BT 2020 to forced on. His Epson does not automatically switch between HDR and SDR picture modes. You have to manually switch. So would forcing 2020 output at all times allow him to leave his Epson in one picture mode at all times? Well, it would, but then he would take SDR and always put it out as BT 2020, right?
But that's okay. Because standard dynamic range with Rec 709 color all put into a BT 2020 container is fine. HDR is separate from the wide color. Even though they come hand in hand, they are two separate things. I am okay with that idea. It's very similar to what I recommend from an NVIDIA Shield, which is to always have it output Rec 2020 no matter what. So yeah, I'm very okay with that suggestion. This way, no matter what, whenever you're using your Xbox One, did he say S that he has? Whenever you're using your Xbox One S, your projector will always be getting the same signal, except for sometimes it'll be SDR, sometimes it'll be HDR, but it'll always be 4K 30, always Rec 2020 color, and switching between SDR and HDR, it'll just be a matter of, well, let's think about that. Because the SDR signal, if you're using a picture mode that has been tuned for HDR,
that's what I was worried about.
It's going to be dimming everything. So I think you still... So where this would apply is if you are converting HDR to SDR all the time, right? Never actually outputting HDR from the thing, that you just convert. So it's coming out of the thing as HDR, but you're converting it into SDR, and then you're always showing it as SDR with wide color. Right? Which is what a lot of people do with a projector, because they're like, my projector doesn't get super bright anyway, so I'd rather just retain the wide color, but actually put everything into an SDR container. He wants to switch between HDR and SDR. That's really what he wants to do. You need to switch picture modes manually, but that's what you need to do.
So he started off by saying this was a good idea, and now he's saying
it's still okay, but it doesn't actually solve what you want to do. You're still going to have to switch picture modes. Yeah.
So do you have any other tips to get the best looking images?
Actually, yes. For the Xbox One S itself, in this instance, and since you are going to be loading the software if you follow this advice, I would actually recommend you have it output RGB. For anytime you're connecting the Xbox One S directly to a display or through a receiver to a display, I'm going to tell you to activate the Allow YCBCR 422 feature so that it turns video. So it actually takes the original video, which was YCBCR, decodes it into RGB inside the Xbox, but then puts it back into YCBCR before it sends it out to your display. Normally, that is the way I would have you do things, but when you have an HD Fury in the signal chain in between, I would say just get everything out of the Xbox as natively as you can. It's going to decode everything into RGB anyway, whether you want it to or not. Just have it outputted as RGB. Let the HD Fury handle all of the stuff of converting it to something that your Epson handles. That's what the Fury is for.
Right. Patricio bought a Marantz SR6012 receiver from Accessories for Less back in June. He says overall it's great, but there are two issues that are bugging him a bit, and he'd like to know if we think he should try contacting Accessories for Less for repair under warranty, or if they aren't actually defects and there won't be anything that Accessories for Less will be able to do for him. Anytime he runs Odyssey, he gets a warning that at least one of his front speakers is out of phase. He never got that warning when he was using this Denon X1600H before, and it isn't consistent. It'll warn that different speakers are out of phase each time he runs it, sometimes just one speaker, sometimes more than one. What do we think? Yeah, that happens.
It does happen. Yeah, that I don't think is a defect. It's very common.
That's an Odyssey thing. Yeah, that happens
And
with
actually,
Odyssey.
something I would recommend, and you might not keep it this way, but just to try and see, is to actually tow in your speakers maybe more than you normally would, but so that they're like quite literally firing directly at the microphone while you're doing this. Because I suspect, because Patricio has talked before about how he does have a pretty reflective room, and he's got a plan for DIY treatments that he's getting to, but he hasn't done it yet. And I'm like, I'll bet you got some room reflections. XT32 is pickier than regular multi-Q or regular XT.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that if for the moment, before you have your treatments up, if you were to strongly tow in your speakers so they're pointed right at the microphone, I bet you wouldn't get this error anymore. If you try that and that's the case, then you can be quite certain it's not a defect in the receiver or anything like that.
Yeah. I think so too. I mean, this is with reflective rooms. This is a common,
it sure is,
common error.
And you
get
can
from
very safely say, yeah, ignore that. I have triple checked my wiring. I know red is connected to red and black is connected to black, and let's just move on. And Odyssey will let you do that, so that's okay.
Yeah. So when he's in the middle of a movie, sometimes the Marantz will randomly switch itself to a different input. He is very certain he isn't just sitting on the remote or that it has low batteries. He can switch back to the correct input. It doesn't seem to repeat this random switching error, but it happens almost every time he watches something, which is super annoying. Any ideas? No.
Yeah, this one is weird. This one is weird.
This is what I do to my kids when they're watching a home theater, and I've got the Denon or the Harmony app on my phone.
Yes.
And I can switch the volume, and I used to mute stuff all the time on them just to mess with them, but that got old.
Well, this is just it. I mean, I would check because there are at least 3 ways to control this AV receiver. There is, of course, the infrared remote. And I mean, the thing is, if you're in a sunlit room, there are crazier things that have happened in my experience than a truly random flash of light that like kicks off an IR receiver. It'd be really weird, but you could literally try just putting a little piece of electrical tape over the IR sensor. You shine a little flashlight on the front panel and you'll find the little circle. There'll be a little transparent
usually
part.
in the bottom right of where the display is.
But you could try covering that up, because so you cover that up, and if it never happens again, it's getting an IR signal from somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but that could be it. You can also control it via IP through your network. So if you have set it up to be IP controlled in some way, that's how the app works. Just try turning off or disconnecting your Wi-Fi or Ethernet connection for the moment. Just try that and see, although, you could be endlessly playing movies and it never happens, and then, one day it randomly does. That would be annoying, but you can see if the IP control is part of this. And then there's HDMI CEC.
Right.
Which definitely you could try turning that off. That is under the settings, video, HDMI control is what you need to turn off to turn off CEC. So there's 3 different things that could theoretically be sending a random command. And you can turn all of them off basically to one at a time.
What I would do is I would take an IR blaster, one of those direct IR things from your Harmony hub. Yeah. I would put it right on top of the IR receiver of your receiver.
Yeah.
And then I would put electrical tape or something over the top of this so that it would block out all exterior light.
That is the only thing that can send it an IR command. Yeah.
If you did that and this still happened, then the CEC, first of all, if you haven't turned off CEC already, stop listening to this podcast and go turn off CEC
because that
right now.
I strongly suspect, because that can be your cable box that you think is in standby, and it's like, look, pay attention to me.
Right. There are always on.
That's right.
Devices that will mess with this. So turn off CEC.
For sure.
Number one. Step number 1. You could just turn that off and decide if that works or not. But I would put the IR blaster on top, put some electrical tape on top of that, because it's black and you won't really see it unless you're looking very closely. And just so that that's it. And that should fix your issue. If that does not fix your issue, between those 2 things, then I would maybe contact accessories.
Well, yeah, because I mean, there can be a fault inside. There could just be a straight up electrical fault.
It would be some sort of short or something like that.
There could be on the inside, like inside the case part of the IR sensor could have a fault in it. And it might be a really simple fix. So you know what? It never hurts to call. Accessories for Less is really helpful. They will try to help you. So it never hurts to call them. Don't feel bad about it.
I would call them anyways and just say, listen, I contacted AV Rant. They said to do these things, so I'm doing them. But I want to let you know, I want you to start a ticket on me so that if this doesn't help me, I can come back to you and get my warranty.
That's right.
Because
and it's a 1-year warranty. You're well within that. So
So at the moment, he uses a manual pull-down 106-inch screen with his Epson 8350 projector. It wasn't very expensive, but it's performed very nicely. He has a window behind the screen, and the room converts into an office, so the screen has to be retractable. The room is roughly 11.5 feet wide, and he sits 11 feet away from his 106-inch screen, which gives him a 38.5-degree field of view, for those of you interested in such things. He feels like he'd like a larger image, but he doesn't want to spend more than $700 and doesn't particularly want to move his speakers.
They are wall-mounted.
So if the speakers stay where they are, and the screen would need to be acoustically transparent, and it would need to be retractable, it would need to come 6 inches closer to the speakers to fit. It would need to come 6 inches closer for the speakers to fit behind. So would 120 inches be the right size? What screen would we recommend? And what's the difference between the cheap screen options and the expensive ones? And just for reference, he's thinking he'll upgrade his projector to the 50 UB next year. You know what's the cheapest option for this? Move your chair forward.
Move your seat closer. That is definitely the cheapest option.
This costs nothing.
No question.
You don't have to change your screen. You don't have to move your speakers.
And he's like,
all you have to do.
Room converts to an office. It sounds like he has a chair that can move. Wouldn't
just
one
move
think?
Your chair forward.
Yeah.
I mean, how hard is that? Dude spent zero money.
Yeah, that is certainly the most cost-effective solution. Now, he had other questions about screens in general, so that's fine to go over. So he was saying, first of all, he's sitting 11 feet away, but if he were to do this screen upgrade, the screen would move 6 inches closer to him, so that is 10.5 feet, right? Now, 10.5 feet with a 120-inch screen, that is just over a 45-degree field of view.
That's pretty big, dude.
Which is big, but I love it for CinemaScope. The 45-degree field of view is exactly what I want for CinemaScope movies, but that is like right out to the edges of my peripheral vision if I'm just staring straight forward, and that is as big as I personally like to go. Some people like to go even larger, but to me, 120 inches at what you're describing is certainly not out of the question. I probably wouldn't go any larger than 120 at 10.5 feet away, and I might go down to 110 or 115 or something like that. But I'd be in the 110 to 120 range. So that's, size for distance, what I would suggest. Now, $700 for a retractable, acoustically transparent screen where you wouldn't be noticing the weave or the perforations in that screen from only 10.5 feet away, I don't have a great suggestion for you, unfortunately. I mean, the best of the bunch would be Elite Screens Acoustic Pro UHD, and you definitely want to get the Acoustic Pro UHD, not the Acoustic Pro 1080 when you're sitting this close to it. It has the finer weave. Still not spectacular, but that would be the best of this sort of price range that you might be able to get, and it would have to be a manual pull down, not a motorized, but he's already using a manual pull down, so that's okay. But honestly, at that close a distance, I would want to get like Seymour AVs.
I was going to say, but then you're going into bucks.
Or Illusion Visions.
I mean, it's worth it.
Yeah, Illusion Visions is very similar, and you can sit that close to that. But both of those are very similar in price and well more than $700, especially in the retractable version, because both of them only offer motorized for that. Right. So you're way past your budget for that. So you might be able to do this with an Elite Screens Acoustic Pro UHD. That would be the one to consider for what you're looking at. But I mean, I can't really fathom doing all that in this situation when, you can just move your seat closer.
Move your seat closer. Yeah. Problem solved.
Yep.
Nothing else, no money spent.
I mean, the only other thing would be to take down your wall-mounted speakers, move them wider apart so that it doesn't have to be acoustically transparent. That would be only other way to stay within this budget. And then you could go Elite Screens, just regular white. You could go silver ticket if you really. Well,
I mean, if this is a retractable screen, anyways, I mean, he can go with a smaller, cheaper retractable screen. and just pull it down, just move the entire screen forward off the wall.
Yep, that too.
You know what
Yeah,
I
I
mean?
mean, you can actually ceiling mount it. Right now, he has it
Right.
front wall mounted on some wood planks, but you could actually ceiling mount it and have it closer to you. But you could do that with your existing screen.
Yeah, just move the whole thing
Just move the whole thing forward, and now your field of view has increased.
Or cheaper, move your seat forward.
Right.
It's the solution that fixes all the problems with the least amount of
it sure does.
everything.
The general question of what's the difference between the cheap screens and the expensive screens? Well, actually, if you're talking about just a solid, non-acoustically transparent white screen, I mean, what Silver Ticket is offering at the very low price point, I mean, technically is the much more expensive, let's say, Stuart film screen even that much more accurate? Well, yeah, measurably, you know, the light that reflects off a Stuart film screen matte white is measurably changing the color that came out of your projector even less. But man, is it splitting hairs, and for the cost difference, hugely not worth it. But for the acoustically transparent, there are legitimate differences in how tight that weave gets, how visible the weave is from how close you are, and also the color accuracy and how much light leaks through it and those type of things. So in those cases, I can justify a Seymour or an Illusion Vision when you're sitting close to acoustically transparent. If it's plain white, I'm like, it's really hard to justify expensive.
Yeah. Dean. So Dean's wife bought them an 82-inch Samsung Q70 TV on Black Friday. It's going in the corner of their great room, basically at a 45-degree angle. His wife really wants it to be corner wall mounted, but she doesn't want any of the mount to be visible.
Yep.
Good luck. Furthermore, they have a long table already in that corner, and they want the TV to appear as though it is floating above that corner table, which means the edges of the TV can't be tight against the walls. There needs to be about 10 to 12 inches of space on either side. I mean,
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Dean searched for the longest full motion TV wall mount he could find and came across one that will extend as much as 40 inches from the wall and hold 110 pounds. The 82-inch TV is just under 100 pounds and 72 inches wide from side to side. Will that wall mount work for him? Seems like, even though it wouldn't be long enough, but his trigonometry, it seems like even that wouldn't be long enough, but his trigonometry is a bit rusty. So he wants a mount that spans the corner.
I mean, that's, I think, what they have in mind, but there's a way to make this work, right? So you have your corner, right? You have your, where's my camera? You have your 90-degree angle, right?
I can't see you.
And then you have your TV going across
Here.
that 90-degree angle. So that's a 45, right? So you got an isosceles triangle with the 90 degrees up at the apex and then 45 and 45, right? Now, what you would actually have is the wall mount would be mounted directly to one of those side walls and coming out.
Then you pull the TV out
perpendicular to it. So you would have the TV mount coming out like this and attached at a 45-degree swivel angle, which the mount can do to this TV. And
that's not what they want.
Well, it could work, though. So first of all,
yeah, but you'll be able to from the side.
From
you'll
the
be able to
side,
see the mount
you'll be able to see the mount because they have that gap.
With 10 to 12 inches on that gap. With that gap. Okay, so no matter what you do, I don't see you being able to make this mount invisible.
Completely invisible from every angle. Definitely not.
No, it's not going to be possible.
No, not from every angle. But I mean, physically, you could make it work. And from face on to the TV, you might be able to see just the edge of that wall mount past the edge of the TV. It depends on how that all perfectly lines up. It'd be real close from face on to the TV.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the trigonometry goes, if you do that type of mount, you actually only need the mount to extend 34 inches off the wall to give you the total span of about 85 inches side to side. That's
it needs to be able to rotate
space. Yeah, it has to be a full swivel. Well. But the one that he pointed to can actually do, like, it can swivel the TV 180 degrees. So it can go like flat to one side all the way to flat to the other side is what the thing can do. So physically it would work. But from one of the sides, whatever side wall you attach that extending mount onto, you will be able to see the mount there.
If the TV is always going to be extended like this, I guess you could consider doing some sort of like screen. And by screening, I mean like a curtain back there that hangs down behind the TV and behind the cabinet or table or whatever the heck it is.
Concealing the mount.
Concealing the mount and the wires and everything else, because there's going to be all this stuff. You still have to have two wires that go up there. One for the HDMI cable, one for the power. So you've got at least that going on as well. So that's got to go down the arm of the mount, and then either into the wall behind the mount or down the wall, just hanging down. So
because
a curtain,
there isn't really. Yeah, I mean the only other thing you could do is suspend it from the ceiling. I mean there are ceiling TV mounts. Yeah. So I mean you would see it attached to the ceiling, but it wouldn't be to either side and wouldn't be below it. But the other, you have a table already. Now, maybe you don't
put it on the table.
Maybe you don't want a TV stand on the table itself. Maybe you already use the entire surface of that table to hold things or something. But you can get tall TV mounts, like TV stands, that
would go underneath the table and then above.
It stands behind. Now, would you see one or two poles coming up, for that gap that's in between the tabletop surface and the TV itself? Yeah, you would see those, but they can be, very unobtrusive, and they conceal your wires as well, right?
Right.
So you run the wires up those tubes that hold the TV. So you can get, if you can stand it on the tabletop, if you don't like the stand that came with the TV, you can get replacement universal tabletop stands, and it would just sit on your tabletop like a normal TV would. Or you can get the ones that are actually fully standing. It goes right down to the floor, but elevates the TV. Or you could do this extension mount that you found, but you'd be able to see it from one side. Or you could do a ceiling mount. But those are basically all the conceivable options.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I would go for the TV.
All of them are visible, because none of them are invisible.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
In some way. But I would go for the TV standing. That's what I would do. I wouldn't bother with the wall mount at all.
What is your problem, dog? She just had some weird dream. John recently bought some Paradigm Prestige speakers. They're in excellent condition, and they would have been out of his budget brand new, but he used to use Klipsch Icon series speakers, and he continues to use the Klipsch SW450 10-inch subwoofer for the time being to make up a 5.1 setup with his new Paradigm speakers, and it looks like the sub is his center stand.
No, it isn't. It's
that's not a center. That's not a sub.
No, that is actually just a shelf
box
unit. It is tucked away in the front right-hand corner, so it's
see
in behind his front right speaker, and it's concealed by a bit of a couch arm as well.
All right. So it looks like there's a fireplace on the left. There's probably an L-shaped couch on the right, and it's all hardwood floors and walls.
Flat walls.
There ain't nothing in here that looks absorptive other than maybe the couch.
And even that looks leather, so I don't think it's very
I think
absorptive.
it's pretty leather, yeah. All right, so the setup is in the family room, open to the kitchen. The hallway uses 5.1 setup for movies and TV, but he also likes to listen to 2-channel music, and he likes to crank the volume sometimes and reflecting all over the place.
It sure would be.
With his old Klipsch speakers, I can imagine. So even with his old Klipsch Icon speakers, his Denon 2200W would get very hot during his music listening sessions. Once in a while, he could even get it to shut down.
Thermal protection.
Jesus. Is it under a blanket? So his Klipsch were rated at 98 dB sensitivity, with his new Paradigm towers are rated at 94. And yet again, his Denon gets very hot with his loud 2-channel listening. He knows his X2200W does not have pre-outs, so he's willing to consider a receiver upgrade plus the addition of a 2-channel amp. Would doing so solve his issue? And if so, what should he buy? Both receiver model and amp? Wow, I'm so surprised that this thing is getting so hot to shut down.
Well, there's a couple of things that I'm thinking about here. So first of all, how is the ventilation situation?
Is it in that box
for your receiver? It's not in the image.
Underneath,
in the image it's not there. So I don't know where the receiver actually lives. But so make sure it has good ventilation. But aside from that, I strongly suspect that when he's listening to 2-channel music, he's running his front speakers full range. That he's not using a crossover to his sub when he's doing 2-channel.
Yeah.
There is no way those Klipsch speakers were drawing that much power.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Unless they were full range.
Thermal protection is something that does not happen very often on a receiver if one of two things isn't going on. One, you're playing extremely inefficient speakers extremely loud. Sure. Okay? Or and maybe as well as not having adequate ventilation. The only
Right.
time I've ever had a receiver really, really go into thermal protection is when I had an Xbox 360 sitting underneath it.
Yep.
Basically, the
Feeding
shelf
hot
underneath
air right into
feeding
it like a furnace.
insanely hot air directly into the AV receiver. The receiver was like, "Oh my god, you're killing me, dude." So I moved the Xbox 360 out of the cabinet
Yes.
onto the top of the cabinet out into the empty room because it was cooking everything in my cabinet. So ventilation, I think, is almost certainly at least part of the problem. If it's in that black box underneath that
Normally,
that center channel, I'm guessing that there may be some holes poked in the back for this thing, and that's about it. He probably has his cable box and his game system in there as well, or something along those lines.
Yeah, that could certainly be part of it. So check your airflow situation and what other devices are around your AV receiver potentially feeding hot air into it. But I really do suspect he's running them full range, and if you were to cross them over to your subwoofer, that takes a tremendous amount of the hardest, most power-intensive part of the signal off of your AV receiver. It no longer has to try and send out those very low bass frequencies to your speakers, and that can really free up the wattage. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, those two things should fix your problem, but I suspect it's that receiver's in that box and it's just cooking in there. I can't imagine a situation where a Klipsch, and he is not sitting that far away. I mean, unless that couch is like 30 feet long on that right side.
I think he's sometimes like playing it basically to fill the whole house. You know, it's a wide open space. Yeah.
But they're Klipsch's.
I know.
They should never. I mean, you should clip the receiver before you clip the speakers, and even then they shouldn't go into thermal protection. So he's read that AV receivers aren't the best for two-channel listening. Is that the issue? No.
Nope.
He's read about people having a dedicated integrated stereo amp just for their front left and right speakers, somehow connecting it to their surround sound receiver. But wouldn't that create volume matching issues? And is this about the DACs? It's not about the DACs. It's about heat, and the heat has nothing to do with DACs.
It definitely doesn't have anything to do with the DACs. Nope.
It doesn't have anything to do with AV receivers not being good for two-channel listening, because if you put a integrated amplifier, God help you, into that cabinet or wherever your AV receiver is where it's cooking like crazy, you're still going to have a problem.
And a lot of these separate integrated amps have like 25 watts. That's really common, maybe 50 watts per channel, and they're certainly not going to be giving you...
But they're true watts, Rob. They're not these fake watts from Denon. Whatever.
When it's only two channels. But the way people are doing that is a lot of integrated amps, stereo two-channel integrated amps have a home theater bypass input where the volume knob on the integrated amp itself does not affect the incoming signal. It essentially, that input turns that integrated amp into just a dumb amplifier, which is what you would want. But the people who do that are doing it because they want to run their front, left, right speakers full range. You know, that integrated amp doesn't have a subwoofer output, and they're plugging their two-channel only sources directly into that integrated amp because they believe that analog coming out of the source makes a difference versus having the AV receiver convert the digital signal into analog. Again, he's asking about DACs. So, I mean, look, I don't blame you. Yes, all of this stuff is written out there. If you're reading, you know,
if you get Audiophile magazine, you'll read all kinds of crap.
There is oodles of this stuff out there. It's almost all entirely nonsense. And no, there is no reason.
It's old wives' tales that have been told in the AV community for decades, and people still parrot them because when they do, they get positive reinforcement.
Absolutely.
And that positive reinforcement, but this happens with new products too. And honestly, SVS was a huge recipient of this when SVS first started, and they were selling their cylinder subs with external amplification because it was they were a garage setup back in those days.
They did that for a while.
Shoe as well, right? HSU. That was that sort of, if you want good bass, you got to get SVS on, and that being parroted absolutely 100% made that company what it is. Now they have taken that and gone farther with it because there's been plenty of products that have come out that have suddenly got the darlings of the forums for 6 months, and then everybody. Enough people get it and go, you know what? I got it. It's not that great. I don't know what these people are talking about, and they don't get shouted down enough. Then suddenly people start listening and we go on. But these are the same sort of these things that you're reading probably are not only myths that have been out there since I was a kid, but I've probably repeated them when I first started because I didn't know any better.
Yeah, I did on forums because that was quote unquote knowledge.
That was knowledge. That was fact.
Yeah.
As far as I knew, because other people had said it and they were more experienced. They had 10,000 posts.
Yeah.
So they must know something.
It's Stephen Colbert's truthy. It feels true. It's repeated a lot. But no, what I will say though, your new Paradigm speakers, they can take 250 watts continuously. They can take peaks up to easily 500 watts. That's what they spec, but they can probably take 1,000 for a really short amount of time. So is it possible to use a higher wattage amplifier with your speakers and get even more output than what your X2200W can deliver? Objectively, yes. I mean, your X2200 cannot deliver 500 watts to both of them simultaneously. It doesn't have the ability to do that. There are amplifiers that could. So you said, is there a recommendation? Yeah, I could point you to go to Accessories for Less, grab an X3500H for $450 or $500, right? That does give you a full set of pre-outs. And I could point you to, so what? Emotiva, certainly, right? Get one of their XPA 2-channel amplifiers that can.
Outlaw Audio,
Monoprice,
Monolith amplifiers, ATI.
For sure.
If you want to pay a little bit extra,
all of those can do a
bulletproof amp.
Genuine 200 to 250, sometimes 300 watts continuously, and hit those 500 watt peaks. And you
shove them inside that little cabinet, and they're going to overheat too.
But they would be maxing out the capabilities of your speakers, which objectively the AV receiver cannot do. But before you do any of that, try turning on your subwoofer while listening to your 2-channel music, because I am convinced that, he just talked about the types of things he was reading. Do you believe for a second he wasn't told that when you're listening to 2-channel music, you shouldn't be using a subwoofer and it should be pure direct full range? I almost am convinced that must be the case. So turn your subwoofer back on and let it handle the bass, and see if your X2200W is now up to the task that it isn't trying to force deep bass into your tower speakers anymore.
So he wants to upgrade a subwoofer, and he was thinking the SVS 3000 series, but he has limited floor space. So would the PC 4000 be a noticeable upgrade over an SB 3000, enough to justify the price difference? So when I first read that, I read that as PB 4000, and if you saw my face when I read it
same output
earlier,
capability, but much.
But the floor space, I was like, you can't go if you have floor space issues. A PB is not really. The PC 4000 is vertical, right? So it's a cylinder. So yes, it does have a smaller footprint. Would the noticeable upgrade over the SB 3000? Answer, of course, is yes.
In sheer output, it is a very noticeable output. And since you have completely open to your whole house design, you could if you're playing some thumping music that's actually hitting down like 30 hertz type of stuff, which some, the electronic music is doing. If you're watching movies that are getting down to 20 and perhaps even lower, the PC 4000, you would notice it, no question. If you're cranking it up, everywhere below about 40-45 hertz, the PC 4000 will be louder. That's just the facts.
Yeah. And once you start crossing over your speakers into your subwoofer, you will notice it. So Paradigm's own center speaker stand for the Prestige series is way too expensive, which doesn't shock me at all. So any center speaker stand recommendations? We always recommend Sanus. My computer is currently sitting on a Sanus stand as I read this to you now. My center channel behind me is on a Sanus stand. I have another Sanus stand in the back just in case. So yes, Sanus is my go-to brand.
Absolutely. I would go with their Steel series. Why not get the really nice one? So the 18-inch tall stand, which is the same as the height as the one Paradigm sells. Amazon's selling that for $120 right now, but they do also have a taller 22-inch version, which eyeballing what his center speaker is on right now in his image,
looks closer to that.
It might be taller than 18 inches, and the 22 might work, so that option is there. I think it's $140 on Amazon right now, so definitely less than the $700 that Paradigm wants for their stand.
Yeah. Honestly, none of these speakers, you can pretty much pick a stand.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be Sanus, but you're asking for our recommendation. Sanus is a bulletproof recommendation from us. No one's going to come back to us and say, oh, you recommend Sanus and they suck. No one says that. But
doesn't happen.
If I went on Amazon and searched for center channel stand, I would be looking for the right height. And then maybe if my speaker didn't already have it, which it does, I would be looking for something that allowed me to adjust the angle slightly. if you don't already have that ability with your center channel, or if you're looking for that ability, I might look for those two things. Other than that, I wouldn't really care
gives you
what
that as well. So there's really no
So there you
downside,
go.
and you can fill the steel tubes that hold it up with sand or lead shot or kitty litter, like I would suggest. Line it with some plastic and put kitty litter in there, and that'll weigh it down really nicely, make it inert.
Bobby finally got his pair of SVS PB1000 subs from his room that is roughly 12 by for his room. That's what I was wondering about that.
Typo.
For his 12 by 12 foot room, and occasionally gets converted into a guest room. He's really enjoying them. And with diagonally opposite corner placement, they seem to evenly fill his room, but he finds himself craving more, particularly in terms of tactile base. With upgrading to a pair of PB2000 Pro models give him the tactile base he wants. PB1000 in a 12 by 12 room, just turn them up, dude. That's what I would do.
Since turning them up overall might make some parts of the frequency range a little too boomy or uneven or something like that, I'm pretty sure he got a very capable AV receiver. I'm pretty sure it was, if it's Denon or Marantz, you get that Odyssey editor app. What you'd be looking to do if you want, I'm pretty sure maybe he's into car audio or something, or he just wants that. Right. It's kicking me in my back. It's thumping me in my chest. All right. All of that is pretty much, if you said 35 to 55 hertz, that would do it. It's right centered around 40 hertz is all of that real hit you in the chest stuff. You go into your editor app, or if you have a Yamaha, you can just do this manually, or you just put yourself a little boost in there. Start with 3 decibels. Maybe you increase it to 4 or 5, 6 if it's still not giving enough, but give yourself a little boost right in that 35 to 55 range, and that'll give you the kick you're looking for. The PB1000s have the output capability you need. You don't need to get larger, higher output subs. That's not the issue. You're just looking for something in the frequency response to be boosted a bit.
And the super low stuff, you're only going to get a couple of more hertz out of it. You're not going to be getting that much more by going up into the. I'm pretty
sure he's looking for that slam, that it just hit me in the chest. That's the 40 centered at 40 hertz.
So most of his speakers are the Klipsch Reference R14 bookshelf model that uses a 4-inch woofer. He's been considering upgrading to the Reference Premier RP500, a higher series, and larger 5.25-inch woofers. Would these be a worthwhile upgrade, or would upgrading his subs make a more audible difference? I don't think you need to upgrade any of this stuff.
Yeah, you don't really need to upgrade anything. I will say, though, I'm almost reticent to say that. In fact, you know what? When we answer his next question, it's going to make it much easier, but the Reference Premier series is, in my opinion, a nice upgrade to the entry-level Reference series. It's not for nothing that they have a separate series that they went up. It's a considerably different horn design that they use in the Reference Premier. I find it much less objectionable than, from my personal taste. There are people who love the entry-level Reference series sound, and I have no problem with anyone who does. For my personal taste, I find the Reference Premier sound to be a little bit more refined. I'd put it that way. A little bit more even frequency response. I mean, Klipsch's always extend well up into the high frequencies, but
I was gonna say,
they can sound a bit hard, a bit harsh sometimes. It's not difficult for a horn speaker to do that, and the Reference Premier seems to nicely ameliorate that a bit. Still keeps the extension, but it doesn't sound as harsh. So maybe audition them. I wouldn't be opposed to auditioning them. I really wouldn't.
You honestly, sir, you were in a room that's so small, you can pick any speaker.
Well, I mean,
it doesn't matter.
Output has nothing to do with it.
Right. So if you're trying to upgrade because of higher output or more bass or whatever, then I think you're going down the wrong path. But if you're thinking, I would like to get a speaker upgrade that has better sound, you don't have to stick with Klipsch. Number one. I would go out and start auditioning speakers. Like Rob said, the Reference Premier is a better speaker. I mean, I'm okay with Rob saying that. I haven't heard them myself, so I can't comment. But there are plenty of really good speakers out there, and I would
in that
highly,
price
if you're
range,
looking for an upgrade,
the most popular price range that there is of like the $500 to $600 per pair bookshelf speakers. There are so many. I mean, you know what I would tell you to do now, because you have a really nice system that you've put together, and you're already thinking, well, could it get even better? And it can. We've all been there. But I would turn this into a fun project and hobby now, Bobby. I would start auditioning speakers exactly like Tom says, because there's so much out there for you to experience, that you're starting from a really good place, and now you can just make really informed comparisons.
I would actually think of it this way. Instead of thinking I want an upgrade on my current speakers, I would think to myself, I want to get my forever speakers. And then don't think of price points. Don't think of, size issues. Just go out there and listen to everything until you get an idea of what your forever speaker sounds like. And it might be, you might go into some place and it's like, $20,000 a pair. And you're like, okay, I am never going to afford these things. That's never going to happen. But now I know what my forever speaker sounds like. Let's keep auditioning until I find something that's close enough to that I know that has a price point that's more reasonable. It might take me 5 years to get there, but more reasonable for me to afford. And then buy those, because I mean, there is nothing wrong with the gear you have right now.
Nope.
Nothing.
You've got a really good platform and comparison, like a point of reference for all future comparisons. You've done really well, and you don't need to upgrade any part of your audio system right now.
Yeah, I agree. So he's using the Epson 8350 projector, and he wishes it had better black levels. His walls are painted gray, his ceiling is black, and he's using a pull-down Elite Screens 92-inch white screen. He isn't ready to upgrade his projector just yet, so is there anything to do in this setup without spending money to make the black levels better? Would moving the projector farther back do anything? I mean, it would make it dimmer, but you would probably...
Ever so slightly. He was talking like literally 1 or 2 feet, which would be imperceptible.
I don't think that you would see anything. I mean, make sure that you're blacking out the rest of the walls, but that's really not going to help your black levels unless you're having some sort of... what did he say this is used for? Is it sometimes used for
occasionally used as a guest room?
Guest room.
I mean,
if you don't have full light control, that's the best way to get your black
100%. I mean, if you feel like I put blackout curtains over my windows and it gets really dark in here, but there's like a little bit of light that leaks around the edges of those curtains, which is really common. I mean, truly black it out. I mean, if you went from matte gray walls to matte black walls, that's not going to make this kind of difference. And the 8350 just inherently, does it have OLED-like black levels? No, it just doesn't. I mean, it's inherently the 8350 was never an ultra black projector to begin with. Just inherently, it does not have super deep black levels. I mean, the things people do to counteract that is to get a low gain or a gray screen. I mean, that's what part of those gray screens was about, to try and improve that. I wouldn't go down that path. What I would do, I mean, he said
since we're not letting him spend any money on speakers or subwoofers, he's now got money to spend on a projector.
That was just it. I mean, you said you don't want to upgrade your projector, but I think he had an eye towards upgrading his audio. I'm like, take all the money you were considering on spending on your audio and upgrade your projector. That would be the way to truly improve your black levels, assuming your room is truly blacked out, that it doesn't have any light leaking around your window or an ambient light source of some kind.
Yeah, that's about the only thing you can
really
do.
Is.
I would not go down the route of getting a gray screen. I think that's just...
I'm not in favor. I'm just saying that's what people do to try and compensate.
All right. Ryan got an Epson 5050 UB projector, but its price means he's still using his OLED Sony receiver.
That should be old.
OLED?
An E snuck in.
You could see.
I got typos
you could
this
see
week,
why.
Dude.
You could see why I let that one pass as I was reading, because it's at the end of a line.
There is such a
OLED
thing as Sony OLEDs as well. I'm sorry about that. No, he got a 50/50 projector, and he spent all his money there. So.
Okay, so he's still using his old Sony receiver that cannot pass through 4K. It's a Sony DH520. That was just meant to tide him over, but he's still going to be using it for a while. For his streaming services coming from an Amazon Fire TV stick, if he wants the 4K HDR video, he will have to plug it directly into the Epson. But then he wouldn't have any audio, so that's bad. So could he use one of those HDMI audio extractors and send the optical audio output from that to a Sony receiver? He's completely fine with the audio being only 5.1 Dolby Digital, since I'm sure that's all his receiver can handle anyways.
Probably.
And probably all the speakers he has as well. Okay, so he's got a new projector, a very old receiver, and he wants to be able to get everything to everything.
Yeah,
so
he wants the 4K HDR video go into the projector, and he separately send the audio somehow to his AV receiver.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got an audio switch that can extract the HDMI audio and send it, then that's the way to but you're still be spending money. I mean,
some, but they're quite inexpensive. Yeah. They're like $40, $45. So I like the ones either from Sewell or a Monoprice Blackbird. Those are the ones I'd point you to, but there are oodles of these that are available, and they all work pretty well these days. Look for one that does 18 gigabits per second on the HDMI pass-through part of it, but extracting the audio to an optical output, totally fine.
Right, and that will allow you to do the HDMI handshake with the projector without having
directly.
It mess up.
That's right.
Yeah, without trying to connect the second HDMI cable to your receiver, which would then say, "Oh no, I'm only HDMI."
And it's not as though a Fire TV stick is sending out True HD or DTS HD Master audio. But at most, it's Dolby Digital Plus. So
yeah, but with this receiver, with this switch though, you'll be able to plug in multiple sources, hopefully, and therefore, maybe be able to get a little bit better HDR and all the rest of that. So he's looked through the Sony manual and searched online, but there doesn't seem to be any mention of where reference volume should be on the receiver. Its volume numbers go from 0 to 73. And there's no way to set it to relative volume with negative numbers. So where should he set his master volume when he's trying to calibrate his speaker trim levels? All of the settings are manual with there's no auto setup of any kind. There's got to be a reference out there someplace.
But you know what? It doesn't really matter. You get to choose what your reference volume is now. That's really what's happening.
Yeah.
I would typically give myself at least 12 decibels of headroom. So I would probably proclaim that reference volume is, let's call it 60. It's a nice round, even number. Yeah. It gives me 13 dB of headroom in this scale that goes up to 73. What a number to choose.
Right.
But yeah, that's what I would just set the master volume to 60 and go ahead and use my manual SPL meter or the SPL meter app on my phone and manually set my trim levels with the master volume set at 60.
He's found that no matter what, once he turns the master volume dial on a Sony higher than 38, he can hear a coming from all his speakers. Changing listening modes makes a tiny bit of difference, but not much. He's tried different wall outlets, but it always makes this shh noise through his speakers. Is that just the Sony's noise floor?
Yep.
You've discovered the wonders of signal to noise ratio, sir.
And also, I'm sure he's got 5 speakers connected to this. All of your speakers are also microphones, and that is what the damping factor in your AV receiver is all about. How much can it damp the incoming signal from? There's a little bit of air movement. The drivers pick that up and act as microphones, sending that signal back down to your AV receiver. I bet the damping factor on your Sony is
not great.
I'm gonna guess 80. A good damping factor is 400 or higher. I'm gonna guess your Sony receiver has an 80 damping factor.
So all this is all adding in together to aggravate you just enough to buy a new receiver.
Accessories for less, dude. It's amazing what you can get.
A couple $100. I mean, you're looking for 5.1 sound and the ability to pass through 4K is basically what you're looking for. So if you're going to spend $40 on a HDMI switch, which is going to be your standalone,
this could be an X1500 for $200.
If we told you you could spend another $40 and get something that would make it not go shh anymore, and then another $40, and you don't have to, it would switch outputs for you, and you don't have to do any sort of weirdness there. And another $40, and you would get Dolby True HD and DTS Master Audio. Would all those $40 add up to $250 to $300, which you could get you a brand new receiver at Accessories for Less?
Nope,
because it might be worth it. So he's used the settings from his Projector reviews for his Epson 5050 UB, and it looks very good indeed. But he finds himself distracted by the black bars for a lot of movies. Oh, God. Yeah. Compared to his Vizio P-Series TV, the black bars of his Epsons just aren't as black. They're light black or very dark gray, and it's killing him. Is there any way to make them deep black? Yeah, manual masking would be the way to do this.
Yeah, manual masking would make them truly black. Again, just what we talked about in the last one. If your room is not truly blacked out, then any little bit of ambient light is getting onto your screen.
But still, it's a projector. Projectors are never going to get...
No, even the 5050 UB... I mean, the Vizio P-Series is a darn good TV with full array local dimming. So when it has black bars, it turns the black light off behind those black bars, it's nearly as good as what an OLED can do in that specific instance, because it's not as though there's some little bright object in the black bar that it's lighting up and haloing. It's like it's a continuous black bar that's a strip of the local dimming that is just like, this is all off now on the top and bottom. So your projector is never going to equal that. Yeah, masking would be the only way to equal that.
Yes.
And then making it as good as possible, no ambient light whatsoever. That's about as good as it's going to get. But yeah, I mean, if you go to a commercial movie theater these days, a lot of them don't bother masking off the tops and bottoms anymore. And you look at those black bars, and like, those are not true inky black, as though there is literally no light there.
Oh, they used to like pull the screens and down and everything else. They don't do that anymore. No. So he asks, does it matter where the projector lens is lined up relative to the screen? Does it make a difference if the lens is even with the middle of the screen or the top edge or the bottom edge? As long as it's within the usable lens shift.
Which is very large on a 50-50 UB.
Well, yeah. I mean, so if you have a projector that doesn't have very much lens shift, then making sure you are within that range is very important. Yes. But if you have a projector like yours, which has tons of lens shifts, then as long as you are within the lens shift, you are fine, because nothing digital is happening. It's all just optical, and that means that it's physical. So that means that there's no chance of there being any sort of edge, changes or enhancements or whatever. Like as it's processing keystone, suddenly it's trying to make a line that was straight again, but straight when we're projecting at an angle, and that's there's chances of mistakes and problems there, or not really mistakes, or just it just can't be done. Yeah. So
the only place where this could potentially come into play is if you have an ambient light rejecting screen, say. Right. In which case you wouldn't want to have the projector like way above the screen and shining, sort of down at the screen at an angle, because that's the direction where the screen is attempting to reject light coming from it if it's an ambient light rejecting screen. But I don't believe that's the case if you're using a normal angular reflective screen that's, probably white, even if it's gray. If it's a normal angular reflective screen, doesn't matter where the projector is.
Light rejecting screens, exterior or light rejecting screens, this can be more of an issue. Sure. But
there you would basically want it as the projector as close to your own eye level as possible, because then the light is making a straight bounce forward back to your eyes. That's sort of what you're going for there.
It says there are keystone and pixel shift adjustments on the 50-50. Do these affect image quality?
Yes.
Yes. Don't do those.
Avoid those at all costs. So
that is. Those are the adjustments of last resort. And if you can't move your projector into a position where you can't use them, then you should have either found a different projector or you shouldn't have got a projector at all, in my opinion, because keystone is what you do when you are, in a business setting and, you're setting it up on a table and you got to project it way up on something,
or turn it,
all this other stuff. That's what keystone is for. Keystone is for, I'm setting this up on the fly and I need to be able to make it look at least semi-decent. Right. I would rather, most of the time, I'd rather it just be a trapezoid and people just look at it weird than me adjust the keystone.
The pixel shift, I'm not entirely sure if he's talking about the sub-pixel adjustment, because that is an alignment feature that is on the 50-50, so that each pixel is made up of red, green, and blue sub-pixels, and they are 3 individual chips inside that Epson, and it does give you a sub-pixel adjustment in the 50-50 UB to make sure they're perfectly aligned. But it gives you a test pattern and everything to do that. So go through it. By all means, make sure your red, green, and blue are all perfectly aligned, but avoid the keystone. Yeah, there should be no need for it with the amount of lens shift that the 50-50 offers.
So he can put up a built-in test pattern that shows a grid, and no matter what he tries with the motorized lens shift or the other lens adjustments, the grid is never quite perfect, and that's killing him too. What does he need to do? Well, first of all, dude, you need to stop overusing killing you, because none of this stuff is actually killing you. You're just annoyed, which is fine. But so if you're looking at the YouTube video, you'll see the image that he's putting up, and this is a standard image that you put up on almost every projector will put up there in order for you to line up the edges of the screen with the image that you're going to put up there. And there's a little bit of overshoot usually inherent in this, but you're trying to get the white box to be right inside or I mean, I guess you could do it right outside onto the black of your
frame
masking, the frame masking, right there. And this looks really good. I don't know what this problem is.
All right, so if you were able to blow up this image that you're not going to see it in the image that I show on YouTube. You might be able to see it, but you know what? You need to. So I don't know if your ceiling mount allows you to do this. I'm pretty sure he said it was ceiling mounted. But you need to ever so slightly adjust the, what is that called? Well, it's like the lowering the left-hand side, raising the right-hand side.
Okay.
The roll, I guess that would be, right?
Yeah.
That is, it's physically your projector. There's nothing that the lens shift or anything can do about this. Your projector is physically not perfectly aligned, not perfectly level, or maybe your projector is perfectly level, but your frame, your projection screen is not perfectly level. Right. It needs to be rotated ever so slightly. I can see that.
Is there a little bit of blue on the? Is that what his problem is? I'm trying to figure out what the problem is here because I don't see it.
Well, if you could see the left edge, it's like the white line is like ever so slightly in at the top of the frame on the left-hand side, and then the white edge is right against the frame at the bottom of the left-hand side. So that's what I mean. If you were to just rotate the projector left side down, like I'm talking a smidgen of a centimeter here, because remember how much all of this gets amplified by projection, right? This image is way bigger than the chip inside the projector. So a tiny amount of movement means a considerable amount of movement up on the screen with a projected image. But this is literally the physical alignment of your projector on its mount. This is why I love the Peerless or Chief brand mounts that give you these little worm gears for all three axes, so that you can really finely tune the alignment. If you go for a cheap mount, you won't have those, and that's what you're paying for with, say, the Peerless mount that I love so much.
So are there any settings in the projector that reduce its lifespan? Does setting the lamp to high hurt anything? Do any of the image enhancement settings impact the projector's lifespan? Setting your lamp to high will reduce the lifespan of the lamp.
Yes, it is running hotter and brighter, and it will die sooner.
The image, and most of the times, it's not necessary, okay?
Right.
Unless you are sitting super far, your projector is way at the end or even beyond its recommended range to the screen.
But by default, in HDR mode, it does kick into high lamp mode. That by default, it does that,
So high lamp mode will reduce it. Edge enhancement shouldn't. I mean, I can't imagine what image enhancement you would use.
I mean, there's the other thing is, like, one of the things is, depending on the picture mode you use, it puts a physical color filter in front to give you the true DCI P3 color. But of course, since it's a physical color filter, that reduces your light. So sometimes people, to counteract that, put it into a higher lamp mode.
Well, it's still the higher lamp mode that's making the difference, not the filter.
Right. This is a 50/50 UB that can wobble its native 1080p panel so that each pixel is used twice per frame to give you pseudo higher resolution. Not true 4K, but like 4 million pixels instead of 2, and not the 8 million pixels of 4K resolution. But it is wobbling the panel, and that is a physical thing that I think that would ever... I really don't think that would do anything. Mostly it's the lamp. The lamp mode, putting it in high lamp mode, does mean the lamp will burn out faster. That's just a fact. But other than that, the rest is fine.
So how difficult is it to replace the 50/50 UB's lamp? I don't know.
Not difficult
They're usually
at
not
all.
that hard.
No.
Usually it's just a...
It's one Phillips head screw and a little tab that you pull down that opens up the hatch. I think there's
Don't touch the new lamp
with your fingers. No.
Never touch the new lamps.
No.
If they don't give you white gloves or whatever, get something clean, very clean.
Get some fresh white gloves. That's what you want to touch that with.
Yeah. Tom, not me, different dude. Tom got one of the new Ascend Acoustic Sierra Duo center speakers. Nice. Its form factor is just what he needed. He's coming from Ascend CBM 170 SE speakers, which he's enjoyed, and they blended very well with this PC13 Ultra Sub. He'll move the 170s to surround duty. He's looking for new front, left, and right bookshelf speakers. So should he go with the regular Sierra 2s or the newer Sierra 2EX? He sits about 10 feet from his speakers, and he'll continue using an 88 hertz crossover to his SVS sub. So does a fancy new woofer in the EX do anything for him, or can he save a few dollars and not lose any performance with the regular Sierra 2s? First of all, I didn't know that there was an EX. So what's the EX mean?
So the EX it's a different woofer and a different crossover. Of course, same tweeter, same cabinet, but new woofer, new crossover. It's got a phase plug in this new woofer.
Ooh, sexy.
It's almost entirely about getting the speaker to play a bit lower down into the bass. Okay. As a result, its efficiency is like 1 decibel higher, but really only because it's outputting lower frequencies than the original Sierra 2. Power handling is about the same. Output is ever so slightly higher in the EX model. You don't need
10 feet away.
you don't need any of that. You can save the money, go with the regular Sierra 2. You don't need the extra. So as much as I love Dave Fabricant's speaker designs and agree with almost everything he does in speaker design, he is still someone who, like, I want full range speakers if I can have them. And we part ways on that. I don't even want full range speakers, but he still holds it as sort of an ideal that if he could have full range speakers, he would. So the Sierra 2s were never bass heavy at all. And he was like, hey, this new woofer lets the extend even deeper. You don't need that regular Sierra 2.
Will was happy with our previous recommendations to him for a BenQ HT2050 projector and the Marantz SR6011. So for his 4K projector upgrade, he took our recommendations again and got himself a BenQ HT3550 and a Panasonic UB420 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. He'll use that player plus a TiVo Bolt and an Apple TV 4K as his sources. Boy, I haven't heard the words TiVo Bolt in a while. It's been a while. His room is completely light controlled, but the walls and ceilings are white. Could we suggest the best settings for his new BenQ, his Apple TV 4K, and his Panasonic UB4020? Wow, it is white.
White walls for sure. White ceiling. Carpet on the floor. Ceiling. Light color, but not quite white.
Light color, but not white. Yes.
He's got quite a lovely collection of discs going on there over to the side of his room. But this is
it might be CDs too. CDs in the back.
I think
it looks
so.
Like, and then
definitely Blu-rays, that's for sure. Yeah. And a nice rack holding all of his gear. So a lovely setup. I really quite like that. And you're in luck, or rather, I'm in luck answering this question because this is a lot fewer settings to go through than last week's settings bonanza. Because that BenQ HT3550, one of the reasons I love it is out of the box. It is really close to accurate. Could it get theoretically even a bit better with a professional calibration? Of course it could. But you know what? When you're watching SDR, if you put it in cinema mode, you're done. There's like nothing else to do. It's really close to perfect Rec 709 color right away. And for HDR, if you put it into D Cinema, it activates the color filter that gives you full DCI-P3 color, and you're done. It tone maps really, really well if the signal is coming in at 1000 nits. And guess what your Panasonic UB420 is set to do out of the box as soon as you turn HDR Optimizer on? It puts everything out at 1000 nits. So this is perhaps the easiest settings ever. Choosing your picture mode, that's about it. But yeah, this is one of the reasons I love recommending these because it makes it so easy for the user. There's almost nothing for you to adjust. The only other thing is in the Panasonic, I think you actually have to turn on 24 hertz support. So go ahead and do that because that'll give you judder-free images. Isn't that lovely? Apple TV 4K, for once, I'm actually going to refer back to last week because instead of going through all those settings again, I went through them twice last week. So listen to the Apple TV 4K settings there. But again, not a whole lot to do.
Andrew on Twitter. Andrew upgraded his Denon S720W with Odyssey Multi-Q to X3600H with XT32. So he's got the best Odyssey. When he used the Odyssey Editor app to compare the results, the aftergraph for the 3600H with the XT32 looks way smoother.
So this first one is what the Odyssey Editor app showed him from his S720 with regular Multi-EQ. And then the second graph is what's showing with XT32 from his X3600H, and the aftergraph is nearly flat line, except with their little 2 kilohertz compensation filter that they throw in there. But that's just the before and after that the Odyssey Editor app is showing. So we'll get into why you don't necessarily believe all of that.
But then he heard that the aftergraph is just a prediction, that the real results don't necessarily look like this. Is that true? Yeah, it doesn't take any after measurements.
It doesn't take any after measurements. It's just a prediction.
It says we're going to make these changes, and this is what it should look like based on all the maths. Yeah, so Yeah.
So this is what it's shooting for. That is true. This is what it's shooting for. What it believes its tens of thousands of filters can do with XT32. Versus what it believes it's. What does multi-EQ have? It's just over 100, something like that. Filters. So it's doing its best to smooth some things out there, but that is just a prediction. If you were to measure it with Room EQ Wizard, it would not look like that flat of a line with XT32 unless you applied some smoothing fairly liberally to your graph.
Right. Yeah, they're probably smoothing the crap out of it, even if even their results,
Yep.
Their predicted results are smooth as well. So don't blame Odyssey. blame the fact that if they gave you what it really looked like, everybody would complain.
Yeah, they would freak out. Yeah.
So both before graphs show quite an obvious dip from about 110 hertz to 150 hertz or so. What causes that, and what room treatments, if any, would fix that? So he's got this dip way down there. That's almost certainly some sort of room dimension.
And this is only for his front left speaker, these images that he's showing. So this is the response of the front left speaker. Now, good news, if both of the before measurements, which it really is taking a before measurement in either case, and they are showing really quite similar frequency response graphs for the before, whether it's regular multi-Q or XT32. So you can feel fairly confident that that's about what my speaker is doing before any correction. 110 hertz, that is bass. Everything below 250 hertz, really below 500 hertz, but certainly below 250 hertz, that's almost certainly right around the transition frequency of your room, where you are no longer able to hear sounds without them having been reflected at about 250 hertz and lower. So 110 to 150, certainly you're in that zone of bass where the room is taking over. It's probably some kind of cancellation in your front left speaker that's going on there at the microphone measurement position. What can help you with that? Thick acoustic treatments can help you in this region. Ones that are about, let's see, if they're about 4 inches thick with a 2-inch air gap, or about 6 inches thick without an air gap, that's the sort of thickness you need to start getting down to below 200 hertz-ish. Corner traps is really what you need. Corner traps is where you can start getting down to maybe about 100, if you're lucky, about 80 hertz. And you're still in the region where you're certainly within the crossover between what the speaker is playing and the subwoofer is playing. The subwoofer is rolling off beginning at 80 going up, but it's still playing sound at 100 to 150 hertz. So the combination of what your subwoofers are doing with what your speakers are doing, that might take care of this all on its own. You're only seeing one speaker playing in these measurements. So there's a chance that just having your subwoofers playing at the same time as your front left speaker would actually nullify this. But if it doesn't, or if it actually makes it worse when the subwoofer's turned on, which is a possibility, having corner bass traps as thick as you can is it can affect this range of frequencies. That's exactly what our corner bass traps are for, is for that crossover region between the speakers and subs that can be problematic.
All right, Infinite Gary. Any opinions on the current Outlaw audio speakers, the sealed Diapolito Array LCR V2, that they say can be used as a horizontal sender, $600 each, and the ported BLS V2 bookshelf, which is $700 a pair. I didn't know about these. I didn't get this far down. Let's be honest, I didn't read any,
these are
any of these questions before.
These are the V2, which actually came about as a result of the OEM for Outlaw that made their version 1 speakers. I forget if they got bought out or went under or whatever it was, but they lost their OEM. So they brought Joe Dapolito out of retirement, because he was retired. They brought him out of retirement to have one more go at putting together a version 2 of these speakers for them. Now, Audioholics did review them. They reviewed these new V2s. I haven't heard them in person.
No, we haven't heard them.
Given that they are designed by Joe himself, I would be kind of surprised if they didn't sound like a Joe Dapolito speaker, which is
not a bad thing.
Definitely not. It's a very good thing. Yeah. He goes for very neutral sound, very wide, even horizontal dispersion, not necessarily vertical. That was the whole point of the Dapolito array, was to contain the vertical dispersion and have very wide, even. And he almost always has gone for soft dome tweeters that are very inoffensive, maybe with the slightest bit of roll off in the highest frequencies, which is exactly what they measured over at Audioholics.
Right.
Nothing surprising about these whatsoever, and I would expect them to sound very neutral, very true to the signal, and in a word, inoffensive in any way. I wouldn't expect them to sound harsh or anything like that unless they were completely overdriven to ridiculousness.
Right. So the Diapolito array, where you have a woofer, tweeter, woofer, turning it on its side, basically. So if it's vertical for the LCR, then you're going to get wide horizontal dispersion on the tweeter, which is what we're looking at here. But if you turn it on its side, then you get wide vertical dispersion, which is not a terrible thing to have in a center channel.
Right.
So
except if you have a wide seating area.
Right.
And,
so that'd be the only real issue that we would see with these speakers.
And that's exactly what Audioholics measured. They're like, turning this horizontal, it's once you start going off axis to the left and right, they're like, it's basically a different speaker at that point.
Yeah.
So I'm not in favor of Outlaw saying, go ahead and turn this horizontal because it looks good, turned horizontally. As I said, I'm like, if you can, keep it vertical. I'm a little bit surprised to see a mix of a sealed Diapolito array design with a regular two-way, just tweeter one woofer ported bookshelf.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure how that's going to mesh perfectly when using them all together. But, I mean, there's nothing about these speakers that would make me go, oh, these are going to sound bad. I'm like, nah, they're going to sound like Joe Diapolito speakers, which are good speakers.
Right. And if you're looking at these speakers and thinking, those LCRs are something I would want, and I sit in an A seat and I don't care what everybody else's seats sound like, or the other people who listen aren't going to care, then there's no reason why you couldn't use one of the LCRs as a center. Just know that the left to right dispersion is going to change quite significantly.
If you put it horizontally. Yeah.
Yes. So Gary was playing a live concert disc, and it said the soundtrack is 5.0. His Anthem pre-pro confirmed the incoming signal is 5.0, not 5.1. Does that impact how the pre-pro handles outputting the low frequencies to his speakers and subs? Should some different listening mode be used, or since this was a DTS concert disc, should he just use a regular DTS listening mode? I would never use anything other than a DTS or Dolby listening mode for me. I mean, I don't like rock concert mode or whatever it is, but it's just going to, so if it's a 5.1, there's dedicated information that goes to the subwoofer.
Well,
but if you use
we've got to be correct on that. There's a dedicated low frequency effects channel that can be individually addressed by the mixer. It doesn't even, the low frequency effects channel doesn't even necessarily have to be played by a subwoofer. It can go into your front, left, right speakers. If you tell your AV receiver, I don't have a subwoofer, the low frequency effects channel will still get played. It'll just get played out of your front, left, right speakers now.
So when you get a 5.0 system, there's just not going to be any dedicated information that's in that 0.1 channel that we would normally have. So it's still taking everything that's at 80 hertz. Remember, it's not a hard filter, but everything around 80 hertz. And, as long as you're using your crossover, filtering it to your subwoofer to be played. The same as it would do if it was a 5.1 system or a 7.1 system, or if you had 2.0 and you wanted it to play in all 5 of your speakers plus your subwoofer, it would take that information, those 2 channels, spread it out, all the, based on algorithms, spread it out to all 5 of your speakers, plus cut off the bottom end and send all that to your sub. It's all the same.
I'm certain these are 5 full range channels that they've used on this concert disc. So there's bass in all 5 of those channels. I'm sure of it. But your pre-pro is now the thing that will take that and filter off the lowest bass and send it out of the subwoofer output. That's what its bass management is there for. But you know what? I like this question because it's an important distinction that needs to be reiterated every once in a while, is that 0.1 is not a subwoofer channel. And if you don't have a 0.1, that there somehow isn't anything being sent to your subwoofer. That's not how it works. It's not this specific channel for that specific subwoofer. It's its own individual thing that, yes, only carries bass, but it could be played by theoretically any speaker.
Right. The subwoofer, the 0.1 channel could have a full range signal going through it.
Theoretically. It's cut off at 150, I think, hard, but yeah.
Right. But they could be playing stuff that that even your subwoofer wouldn't play. And so it's not necessarily a just that 20 hertz information and nothing else or whatever.
No, it's a channel.
You get a 5.1 DTS disc or 7.1 or 7 point whatever it is. It's not like on the 7 channels, there's just down to 80 hertz, and then in the
Definitely
0.1,
not.
everything that bass management is not happening on the disc; it's happening in your receiver.
That's right.
It's been 2 hours.
It sure has. I'm leaving it up to you, man. I'm willing to go as long as you're willing to go.
I'll do one more, and then I have to go get my son. Victor is in the final stages of building his dedicated 13 by 20 foot theater. He has a 7.1.4 set of Paradigm speakers all ready to go, but since he has 2 rows of seats, he pre-wired for 2 sets of side surround speakers. He's got the speaker mounts for the front row all set, but he only has speaker wire inside the walls for the second row, since he isn't totally sure if he'll actually install a second pair of surround speakers.
Yep, good.
All the speaker wires run back to where his Denon X4500H will be. So if he does add a second pair of surround speakers, how does he do it? Does he need to run some more wires to connect the front row pair to the second row pair? Does he need some sort of fancy speaker switch box, or is there an easy way to connect the wires that he's already run? Yes, you can do it all at where they've
already been run back at the receiver.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I honestly, I know we've probably already talked about this, but 13 by 20's got 2 rows of seats. I would rather see a 5.1.4 with 2 sets of side surrounds than the surround back, but you've probably already talked to us about that, so whatever.
Oh, he's got room for a 7. I don't mind that. But yes, 2 sets of side surround speakers. I would totally be in favor of it in your setup. And what you would do, let's say the front row side surround speaker is speaker 1, and the back row side surround speaker is speaker 2. All right. You would connect the red coming out of the surround binding post on your X4500H. The red would connect to the red of speaker 1. And then the black binding post of your X4500H would connect to the black of speaker 2. And now you take the black from speaker 1, which has been run back to where your AV receiver is, and the red from speaker 2, which has been run back to where your AV receiver is, and you connect those two together. They don't plug into a binding post. They connect to each other. And now, so the signal, you can think, it goes out the red into speaker 1, comes out the black of speaker 1, goes into the red of speaker 2 directly. Those two just form a line, and then comes out the black of speaker 2 and back to your AV receiver. And that's the circuit in series.
So if you think about putting the speakers right next to each other, just imagine it that way. Yeah. In red, out black, in red, out black. And those in between the two, in between the black and the red of the two
speaker
speakers,
1 to speaker 2, they connect to each other directly.
You just pull that wire all the way back to your receiver.
You stretch it, and believe me, the electricity will make it. It's traveling at 99% the speed of light through that wire. There won't be a problem. Yeah, very easy. You don't need anything fancy at all. You might want to use, a wire nut or something to make a really nice connection between the black from speaker 1 and the red.
Yeah, and I would wrap the whole thing in electrical wire.
Make a really nice secure connection.
I get the wire nut on there and then wrap the whole thing. You could use shrink wrap or whatever. That's that heat shrink.
What you really should use is a butt splice. That is the absolute correct way to do this. Is a butt splice. So we'll mention that once again because it's fun to say butt splice.
It is. So if it connects multiple side surround speakers in series, how many speakers could be connected in series? Well, infinity, but every time you do, it doubles the impedance.
Yeah, assuming these are all identical speakers, which
So let's pretend they're all 8 ohm speakers. Yeah. So you connect 2 in series, you go from 8 ohms to 16 ohms. Yes. Well, 16 ohms receiver doesn't have any problem with. But then you connect another one, and now you're at 32 ohms.
Well, no, you'd have to connect another 2 in series.
2, right.
So that 16 plus 16 gives you 32.
Right. So what you end up doing is, in order to keep the impedance at a reasonable level and not all weird, is you connect some in series and some in parallel in order to offset these things, because parallel will, and you can look this up. There's information online on how to do this, and this would be more of a distributed audio question,
right?
When you're sending a whole bunch of speakers in all over your house, and you want them all connected to one amp, what they'll do is they'll set some in series and some in parallel, so that the impedance ends up being about 8 ohms.
Yeah, somewhere in the 6 to 20-ish range in total, which your AV receiver has no problem driving. But your theater is 13 feet wide. I can't imagine you have great distances to cover. So your AV receiver can almost certainly power whatever. I don't know what number he's thinking. Maybe he's thinking 3, or why would he have 4 with only 2 rows of seats? I don't know. I could conceive of perhaps 3 on each side, although even that isn't really necessary. But if he's just asking out of curiosity, yeah, with a combination of series parallel wiring. Now, it's not as though you could only care about impedance and literally connect like a million speakers in some convoluted series parallel wiring scheme to one amplifier. No, there is, like, you can sort of think of like a bucket of electrons that are making their way through this circuit, and some of those electrons do leave as they power each speaker.
Right.
So you do have that to consider, and eventually you would need a more powerful amplifier. But for your size of room, with paradigm speakers that are very easy to drive, even if you're thinking 3 or 4 on each side, you'd be fine.
All right, Grinder the Grim. Grinder the Grim. First of all, Grinder says his daughter got a big kick of my description of how cool he will be in the zombie apocalypse with everyone having to come to his house for protection. She laughed the whole way through. I'm very entertaining, you're right. But his 8-year-old son just looked at him and said he must be talking about a different Grinder. Yeah, shut up, kid. You don't know what you're talking about. So, man, 8-year-olds, they're the worst. No, actually, I have a 10-year-old, and he's the worst. So, you got something to look forward to. So now he knows exactly how cool Daddy is in each of his kids' eyes. So he asks, do the digital download codes from Canadian Blu-rays, Ultra HD Blu-rays work in the States and vice versa? Dude, I have no idea. I throw those papers away. I'm sorry.
It's not consistent at all.
Yeah, I am sorry.
Largely, you have to say no, because there are definitely some where they don't. There are definitely some where if you tried to plug in the code, it's like, this code is only valid for United States accounts or only valid for Canadian accounts. There are some where they've used the same code across because it's the same region, but not the same country. Yeah. So it's kind of hit or miss. You can't know for sure, but there are cases where if you bought one in Canada, brought it down to the States and tried to use the code, it would tell you need a Canadian iTunes, or like, we don't have Movies Anywhere or Vudu in Canada. So it used to be Ultraviolet. I guess you would have to, what would you even go to these days? I mean, up here, we don't, even Walmart doesn't do it up here. So it has to be what, I think we still do is it Fandango now or something like that? We have a weird service that still does them. Yeah, mostly it's iTunes in Canada. So yeah.
So he's got a JVC X790 projector, a Marantz SR6012 receiver, and now a Panasonic UB420 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. That gives him the option to either output 4K discs in HDR with Rec 2020, plus the HDR optimizer, or to convert HDR to SDR but retain the wide Rec 2020 color. Which do we think is the better way to go? So wait a second.
Yeah, you can convert, but keep the wide color. Or just output it as is from the disc, but with Panasonic's HDR optimizer. So if the disc was 4,000 or 10,000 or just had it all zeroed out or whatever, the Panasonic will be like, nope, it's all 1,000 now or whatever.
Well, it seems like that would be the way to go.
It is, but since you have the HDR optimizer. So the X790 is like, it's not as good with HDR as the newest JVC genuine 4K projectors that analyze the signal frame by frame, which I love that they do that now. The X790 doesn't have that. It basically treats all HDR the same, with the same tone mapping inside of the JVC X790 projector itself. So with the old players that didn't have Panasonic's HDR optimizer, it could be inconsistent from disc to disc. Some discs would look really dark, some discs would look as they should, and it was inconsistent. But since you got a Panasonic player with HDR optimizer, go ahead and send out HDR. I would suggest leaving it at the default of 1,000 nits, because that is what the X790 is already pre-tuned to tone map properly, is 1,000 nit signals. I know you can set it to lower, and go ahead and try it. It's not going to hurt anything. If you like the way it looks better with the Panasonic set to 500, then by all means use it that way. But the JVC is basically set up for 1,000 out of the box, and the Panasonic can do that for you. So yeah, no reason to convert HDR to SDR in your case, because you have the lovely Panasonic.
All right, we need to talk fast. We'll try to get through as many as possible, but at 7 minutes, we're done. Turn Toast has a 5.1.2 setup in a room that is roughly 12 by 36 by 7 feet high. Although some of the walls are angled or jut out, so it isn't a perfect rectangle at all. He has his projector screen mounted over an unused fireplace. His power sound audio sub is in the front left corner. There's a bulkhead for some HVAC in the front right corner. His shelf for his AV gear is also on the right side. And there's a bunch of pictures here, which I'm going to scroll past and not look at. How how bad are that the bulkhead and his AV shelf messing with the sound from his front right speaker. His front left right speakers use speaker wall mounts on either side of his projection screen and fireplace. The front left has a nice amount of air around it, but the front right is only 4 inches from the bulkhead and the shelf beside it. So is that concerning enough that you should consider rotating his entire setup, which would result in his main seat being basically right against the back wall? If you're really worried about it, I would put a panel right next to your right, to the speaker that you're worried about.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't trade what you have now for your seat against the back wall. Nope, that's worse than what you have now for sure.
I'd rather have all that air behind me than I would have a wall directly behind me.
I really don't think this is all that bad, what he has right now. If you're noticing something, it looks like these are like swivel wall mounts. You could try towing in your speakers a little bit more, because right now they look like they're firing straight ahead. So you could try towing them in. But this to me does not look like a big problem.
So he has some 4-inch rock wool insulation that he plans to use for DIY acoustic panels. He was thinking he'd cover as much of the front and side walls as he can, maybe a couple of panels on the ceiling, and then not much of the back of the room, maybe one panel behind behind the windows.
Between the windows, another, I think is what I meant.
Yeah. And another on the slanted wall. Does that sound like a good plan? And should he stuff a panel right beside that front right speaker? Well, if you could angle, like Rob said, you could angle the speaker. You could put a panel right there. I probably would.
There's room for a panel right there. I would. I'm sure. I certainly would.
But then, since you have so much space behind you, I mean, there's lots of diffusion everywhere in this room because you've got like, bookshelves full of stuff.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned that he's getting like really hard, direct reflections from the back of his room. Having some back there by the window, I think, is a good idea, but you were prepared to do that already. And the rest of your plan sounds very reasonable to me. You got panels up on your front wall, something behind that, beside that front right speaker, and then along that left wall as well. I'm all for it. I think you're in good stead.
Last but not least, Gary. Gary started building his home theater 5 years ago and listened to some of our suggestions for the gear that he purchased. But then his friend who was helping him build the room moved away, and Gary set up the gear he bought in a different temporary room. And that theater never got finished. Well, now he's back to finish it, and he was happy to find that our podcast is still going. I wonder how long ago that was.
Maybe 5 years.
The room is roughly 12 by 18 and a half. There are 2 rows of seats, with the front row as a primary row that's exactly 127 inches from eyes to screen in that front row. So he's got a raised thing at the back there.
Seating riser.
Back half. Yep. It looks pretty good.
It does. I like it.
So it's gray everywhere, black ceiling, wall lights. Looks like he's got his runs for all of his stuff everywhere too. 5 years ago, he bought a Sony VPL 40ES 1080p projector, which he uses a lot in that temporary room, and a 120-inch edgeless Elite Screens projection screen. He taped off the screen size in his theater, and it seems a bit large at first glance. So what screen size would we recommend for his primary seating distance? And does the model projector matter? He asked because he does plan to upgrade to a 4K model in the near future. So he's sitting at 127 inches, which is how many feet in inches?
10 and 7 inches, 10 feet 7 inches, and 120.
So we were just talking about that, like 120-inch screen.
That is exactly a 45-degree field of view, which is precisely what I would have recommended. And I think how he ended up with that screen size anyway, because I think that's exactly what we talked about. Now, since he said it looks a little bit large just to his eyeballing it with it taped off, I'm like, well, I guess you're sitting farther away from that in your temporary room right now, because I'm assuming that's the screen he's using. But I'm like, to me, that's the right screen size. I bet once you get used to it, you'll love it. So I don't think there's any reason to change your screen, man. It's all good.
I would put it in here. If you really can't live with it, then get a smaller one. It's not going to be that hard. Now, as far as getting a new projector, if you're going to go we're going to say the Epson 5050. So, let's go with that. But,
well, he might have enough money to get a JVC. If you do, they're super nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are your 2 best options. Does the projector matter? Of course it does. I mean,
But as far as the screen size for the seating distance, not really. No. That doesn't really change.
Really.
I think
just about every.
He was saying. Go ahead.
Unless you're going to put that, unless there's a reason why you're going to put the projector on the back wall, and you're going to get a projector that's not going to have the right throw ratio, that's the only thing you really have to look at, because you have all the control in here to make sure that the projector is the right place. Yeah. And if you've got all that control, then as long as the throw distance is okay, that's all you really care about. Yeah. Then you're looking at features as far as black levels for true 4K versus the pseudo 4K and everything
Yeah,
else.
no, I think he said in his email that he heard us give a few different screen sizes with similar distances. I'm like, first of all, even if the distance is similar but not the same, that changes the number of inches pretty, quickly. As you're talking about keeping the angle consistent, but also we're often considering where speakers have to be placed, which can definitely make a difference. But in your case, you got the right screen size for your distance.
All right, last for sure. We're gonna get through them all.
Nice,
Matt. We gotta go fast. Matt has two surround sound setups in his house, and the one in his basement is the secondary system, and it doesn't get used very much. But he'd still like to upgrade its sound quality. He's currently using in-wall Mica M8 speakers. Well, that won't be hard to upgrade. Upstairs, he's using ELAC Debut 2.0 for his front 3 and surrounds. He was thinking he could upgrade his upstairs speakers to the Ascend CBM 170 SEs for the front 3 while keeping the ELAC surrounds up there, and then use the ELAC front 3 downstairs while still keeping his Mica in-wall surrounds. Or he could leave the upstairs exactly as is and get just 3 new front speakers for downstairs. What do we think he should do? I think you should upgrade the ones you use more often. And I think taking the Ascends downstairs with the
ELACs.
Oh, I'm sorry, the ELACs downstairs with the Micas is perfectly fine.
I just question, though, are the Ascend CBM 170s, as much as I love them, actually an upgrade over the ELAC Debut 2.0? Because
it'd be a lateral movement.
That's pretty lateral, yeah. And if it's going to be, my front 3 are now Ascend CBM 170s, which I love as speaker, but I'm still going to have ELAC surrounds, and then I'm going to have ELACs downstairs, but Mica in walls. I'm like, I don't think you really upgraded your upstairs in a significant way. You now don't necessarily have a perfect timbre match, although it's certainly not going to be bad. Those will all match quite nicely. But I'm like, I think you could spend less if you really just don't like those Mica in walls. I think you could spend less and get 5 speakers downstairs that you like more than your Mica in walls, and leave the upstairs as is, because I don't, as much as I love the Ascends, I don't really think they're a big upgrade over your ELAC Debut 2.0s. Yeah.
Well, spend more on the ones upstairs.
Yes, you could spend considerably more on your upstairs, and then your plan makes perfect sense. But for the plan as stated, I think I might just get some new speakers downstairs. Now, what could work downstairs? Aperion in walls?
Sure.
That's where I would go with this. I mean, I'm assuming he's staying in wall. I don't know if that's the case.
I don't like the idea of upgrading downstairs, honestly. No? I don't think that it's well, if it's not going to be used as much. I mean, if this makes you use it more, then maybe.
Right.
Dog, cut it out. You can hear me. I know you can hear me. Oh, she's such a pet girl. There she goes. So I would if you're going to be able to use your downstairs more because you upgrade the speakers downstairs, fine. But if you rarely use downstairs, why are you worrying about upgrading them? I would only upgrade the speakers that I know I'm going to use the most. And then whatever was left over, I would throw downstairs and not worry about it. So, I mean, I would be looking for KEF. I'd be looking for RBH. I'd be looking for, something that's a step up above what you've got, but it doesn't exactly break the bank. Or I would just keep saving until I could get something that was a lot more expensive.
I mean, the ELAC Debut 2.0s, those are good speakers.
Those are very nice
compare
speakers.
With anybody else's, like lower
range.
Tier type of speaker in that similar price range. So unless it's going to be a sizable upgrade upstairs, I don't see much reason for swapping out those. And I think if you went with something from Aperion downstairs, even if it was like 3 of their satellite speakers, because you're going to do like an on-wall type of setup. I mean, I'm assuming if he was willing to move his ELACs from upstairs to downstairs, it doesn't have to be in walls. But I think Aperion's a great way to go here, no matter what, whether you want in walls or satellites that you can mount on the wall. That'll sound better. I get NHT would be another option too, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. All right, let's Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, too, we better say, because we won't be back live answering questions until the first full week of 2020.
And everybody get ready to hear Rob all stressed out because we got so many questions when we get back. But that's fine.
We can't
wait to answer
I'm prepared. I'm super happy we got through all these. Awesome.
Thank our listeners of the week. We're going to thank Michael and Rohan for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. And we want to thank our 96 patrons over at patreon.com, including Richard, Jim, and Turn Toast for being Patreons. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Indeed. Michael, Rohan, thanks so much for the PayPal donations. Thanks to our 96 patrons at patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. Richard, Jim, and Turn Toast, thank you so much for being some of those patrons.
And don't forget, all you Patreons out there and people who are future patrons, Andrew will be giving away a science fiction themed model to one lucky patron once we hit 100. So if you're interested in something like that, please sign up. It's only $1 a month. And we want to thank James House of Cards for talking us up to Parts Express, and Tom K for sending Rob a gift card.
Absolutely, James House of Cards. Thank you for coming back once again and continuing to support the podcast, talking us up. And Tom, thanks so much for the gift card. I really appreciate it.
For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.